Chapter 92. Although Sector Z was called the Dark Triangle, it didn't mean that it was actually a sea of darkness. It was just that it was an undeveloped area, and that was why it was black on the League of Stars star map. Carrie looked at the exterior scene displayed on the screen and muttered, "This really doesn't look like the Dark Triangle." The scenery outside the starship was similar to the other sectors. The stars were bright, but it was known that the creatures in this area were very dangerous, and magnetic anomalies were common. There was a team made up of specialized personnel on the main ship that was responsible for scanning and probing. According to the old rules, they had to probe at least 10 planets every time they arrived at an undeveloped area, or it would be a disgrace to Vanguard. The periphery of Sector Z had been explored before, and some of them were done by Vanguard. However, no matter which hunter regiment it was, they would only explore a certain number of planets each time. They would not explore too many planets at once, and it was fine as long as they could do it. Exploration was not the same as suicide, at least they had to know their limits. After looking at the general star map, Schotten chose a flight route. This route extended slightly towards the center of Sector Z at a certain angle, but not too far. He would proceed step by step. The partial results of the exploration team's analysis would be transmitted to the 6 squadrons on the main ship at the same time. Looking at the data displayed on the screen, Carrie sighed. They had explored 3 planets since they came to Sector Z. One planet's habitability was rank C, and the other 2 were rank D. Habitability was the degree to which a planet was suitable for human habitation. It was usually divided into 4 levels, A, B, C, and D. A planet meant that the planet was very suitable for human habitation. If they discovered a planet like this, the 6th team would become famous, and they would receive a huge fortune. If it was B-class, then it was just SOSO. Although the conditions were not very good, they could still make do with it. It should be noted that many planets with rank B habitability were not very suitable for human habitation, but they were suitable for other life forms. Therefore, many large families would buy these planets for special breeding purposes. Rank C meant that the planet was not suitable for human habitation. The environmental conditions there prevented humans from staying in their natural state for long periods of time. Rank D meant that the planet was extremely unsuitable for human habitation. It was not a matter of time before humans could survive in their natural state. If the habitability level was D, they only needed to send out probes to search, take samples, and record various parameters, coordinates, and so on. However, these were the work of the technical staff and had nothing to do with Carrie. However, if it was a grade C planet, then it would not just be a matter of the probes. They would also need to send a small team to search the planet, retrieve living creatures, and list out the evolution of the creatures on the planet. When Carrie heard that one of them was a C-grade planet, he stood up and prepared to pick up his weapon. However, Schotten arranged for another team to go down. Although they didn't find much, and the evolution level of the creatures on the planet was relatively low, there wasn't even a single high-grade plant. However, Carrie felt that it was too idle and it was fine to go out for a walk. Bored, he glanced at the Miantuan that was rolling around with Hui Mao not far away. Carrie chuckled and grabbed the Miantuan's tail before it could sense the danger and escape. He rolled it into a ball. Carrie threw the Miantuan like a pinball against the wall. He caught it after it bounced back, threw it again, and caught it again. Seeing this, Hui Mao's pair of cat eyes widened, and its pupils dilated. Its head swayed along the Miantuan's trajectory, and before the Miantuan hit the wall, it jumped up with a whoosh. Smith, not bad. Other than eating and sleeping, it seems that you still have some uses. As he spoke, Carrie threw the Miantuan that had been smacked back to another angle, and it was smacked back again. He changed the angle again, and it was smacked back again and again and again. The man and the cat were having a lot of fun playing there. All teams, attention. A grade B planet has been discovered. All teams, get ready. Smith. The Miantuan was smacked against the wall. Carrie and Hui Mao were attracted by the news, and no one smacked it again. Everyone gathered in front of the screen closest to them, which displayed the results sent by the detection and analysis team. Low atmospheric pressure and oxygen partial pressure, strong radiation. Sigh, it's actually not that bad. It's fine even without the protective suit. Carrie said excitedly as he stared at the screen. A grade B planet was not that easy to discover. A grade C planet was enough to make Carrie excited for a long time, let alone a grade B planet. Most of the time, a small team would be enough for a grade C planet, but for a grade B planet, everyone would basically be sent out. Through the pictures, analysis data, and various parameters sent back by the detector, everyone started to make preparations. Each of the 6 teams had to send out a team in advance. When Tang Qiuqiu saw that Silin, Xiao Shang, Ba Dao, and Carrie were all in the advance team, she wanted to go with them, but Diaz rejected her and asked her to go with the second team. A grade B planet meant that there were a lot of advanced creatures. No matter what level they evolved to, whether they were similar to humans, and no matter what level their civilization had developed to, they could not be underestimated. Even plants could eat humans sometimes. After all, Tang Qiuqiu was still young. In terms of adventure experience, she definitely could not compare to the others. Therefore, for the sake of safety, Diaz rejected Tang Qiuqiu's proposal to join the advance team. Seeing that Carrie and the others had left, the Miantuan slowly crawled to Yudi's feet with a heavily injured look. It hugged Yudi's trouser leg, looking very aggrieved. It wanted to complain that it had been mistreated. Yudi calmly took a sip of tea. Today, we can go and loot Carrie's cabinet. The previously dispirited Miantuan trembled when it heard that. It quickly perked up as if it had been injected with chicken blood. It turned around and ran toward Carrie's room. It crawled very quickly and did not seem to be injured at all. On the other side, Hui Mao naturally followed Silin and the others into the aircraft. Seeing that, Carrie nudged Hui Mao with the barrel of his gun. "What are you going to do?" Hui Mao said with anticipation, "I'm going to look for food, of course." Carrie choked and said to Silin, "Silin, aren't you afraid that something will happen to this little one?" Silin glanced at Hui Mao, who was squatting by his feet and shaking its head rhythmically. "It might not be worse than you." "Yes, I'm definitely not worse than you," Hui Mao said. "Right my ass. Don't think that I won't know the contempt in your words just because you changed the order of your words." Carrie knocked Hui Mao's head with the barrel of his gun. "I heard that cats and tigers share the same ancestor. We're about to go to war. Let's give a loud and domineering roar to boost the morale." Originally, Carrie wanted to give this gluttonous and sleepy cat a blow, but he did not expect Hui Mao to really open its mouth. "Be careful, we're on the aircraft," Silin reminded him. Hui Mao's mouth was wide open. It paused for a moment and adjusted itself. "Take a deep breath." The communication devices of the 6 spacecrafts that were part of the vanguard of the 6 squads were switched on, and the main ship was also connected. Therefore, the sudden roar that sounded like a prehistoric behemoth directly shocked everyone. The aircraft that Silin and the others were on also made an S-shaped trajectory. The pilot of the aircraft was so shocked that he almost jumped up. Roar of a beast? Where did the beast come from? Was it a purposely played sound effect? "Diaz, what's going on?" On the main ship, Shotten shouted into the communication device. "Ahem, this is a roar made by one of our members to boost morale." Diaz wiped his sweat. He looked at Carrie, who was a little dazed, and Hui Mao, who was licking its paws as if nothing had happened after the roar. He sighed in his heart. "No wonder it's our team's cat." The 6 aircraft flew out of the starship and headed toward the green planet in front of them from 6 different directions. After scanning the terrain and confirming the landing point, they landed. The defense system was activated and the Sentinels were released. The Sentinels were distributed around the aircraft in a regular pattern. After confirming that it was safe, the cabin door opened. The first to come out was not Diaz, the deputy captain, but Hui Mao. Hui Mao couldn't wait to jump out. Its nose twitched and it took a deep breath. It let out the long sigh. The smell of food. Then it ran away. "Don't worry about it. Let's do our job," Silin said. Diaz nodded. Previously, when they were on the starship, they had already distributed the work, so there was no need to give more instructions now. "Let's go." Everyone was wearing protective clothing and masks. In addition to blocking radiation, resisting pressure, and maintaining a constant body temperature, the protective clothing was mainly used to prevent contact with poisonous plants. Unknown planets and unknown species, so it was best to be careful. The protective clothing was equipped with weapons. Everyone's equipment was different, so they chose their equipment according to what they were familiar with. There was a scanner attached to the mask, and it had settings such as zoom, filtering, and locking. It provided a variety of vision while also locking on to the target. This kind of equipment did indeed cost a lot of money. It also proved what Carrie said, this was a job that burned money. Chapter 93. Although the detectors and the 6 squads that were scattered around did not find anything related to the mechanical civilization, everyone was still fully armed. Sometimes, native animals and plants were more difficult to deal with than machines. Silen's party was led by Dias as they walked through the jungle. The reason why this planet looked green was because there were many jungles. The trees were many and dense, and many species had never been seen before. The collection and analysis of the plant species was done by the detectors, and Silen's party would collect the information of the animals according to the situation. One had to know that even if it was just information, as long as the species was special and had never been discovered by humans, information about them would be worth a lot of money. The results of the sensors would be displayed on the mask, and the humidity, temperature, and pressure of the surrounding air would also be displayed. There were birds flying over the forest, and they were very fast. Through the instantaneous capture and analysis of the images, they could tell that these birds were similar to eagles, but they were slightly different. Moreover, their cries were sometimes high and sometimes low, sometimes sharp and sometimes low, and sometimes long and short. Stepping on the thick leaves on the ground, the group walked carefully. Silen loosened the mask and took a breath of the surrounding air, distinguishing the mixed smell in the air. The main tree species in the forest was a large tree that had never been seen before. Dias chopped down a large tree that was growing relatively well. The tree was very hard, and it would be very suitable for some manufacturing. The horizontal cut of the trunk showed its growth rings. They were very dense, and there was not much space between each ring. Dias sent the image of this cross-section of the tree rings to the spaceship, and the people on the spaceship sent the information to the starship outside the planet. There would be specialized personnel to collect and analyze the information. "Yo, the flowers on that tree are quite beautiful," someone said. There was a tree not far away. It was not too tall, but it was very thick. The center was about 5 meters tall, and the diameter of the trunk was about 1 meter. There were many branches, distributed on both sides like open wings. The leaves were very thick, and there were some dark brown dots on the trunk, arranged vertically on the trunk. What was strange was that there were some vine-like things on the trunk. One end of the vine was connected to the trunk, and the other end was filled with beautiful red and white flowers. The red and white petals seemed to be arranged by a thin layer of scales. The scattered light from the leaves above shone on the flower and was reflected by the scales. It was like the bright starlight in the universe. Just looking at it gave people the urge to reach out and pick it up. Silen sniffed the air. There was a slight licky smell in the air, like a temptation. If it was an ordinary person without a mask, they would definitely not be able to resist this temptation and walk forward. Although the flowers were beautiful, no one walked up to them. Although the flowers gave people a breathtaking feeling at first glance, based on experience, the more beautiful the flowers were, the more murderous they were. Carrie chopped off another section of the tree that Dias had cut down and threw it at the tree. Almost at the moment when this section of the trunk touched a flower, the surrounding branches that spread out like wings closed at lightning speed, imprisoning the prey. At the same time, with a whooshing sound, Silen and the others saw a row of sharp thorns piercing through the trunk. Those sharp thorns were the dark brown dots that they saw on the trunk earlier. And from this series of reactions, it could be seen that this arrangement was simply a natural trap. The group of people shivered. The trunk was very hard, but those sharp thorns easily pierced through it like tofu. It could be seen that the hardness was extraordinary. Dias waved his hand, and the group continued to walk forward. The more they walked, the stranger they felt. Other than a small number of lethal plants, this forest was actually considered safe, and there were not many poisonous plants. However, other than some small insects, it was too quiet. This kind of silence was not in terms of sound. After all, There was the occasional sound of insects flapping their wings and birds flying in the sky from time to time, but their figures were blocked by the increasingly dense branches. This kind of silence meant that after walking in this forest for so long, they did not see a slightly larger animal. Rabbits, monkeys, wild boars, mice, and whatnot. Based on past experience, the group also looked for some places that might have animal caves, but still did not find any. There were no animals in such a good environment? That was impossible. Some of the images taken by the probes in space around the planet had seen a few large and ferocious animals. It could be said that although this planet did not develop a mechanical civilization, the species' evolution had also evolved to a relatively high level. Dias was puzzled, and he had an inexplicable sense of crisis. He had always trusted his intuition, and his intuition told him that this situation was very bad. They were now deep in the forest, and the deeper they went, the more they felt that there was a big mouth waiting for them. While the group was thinking, the sensors sounded an alarm. Through the scanning area displayed on the masks, the group discovered that some things were coming towards them. There were more than 30 of them, which was 3 times the number of people they had, and they were moving very fast. Without needing Dias to say anything, the group formed a formation, and the weapons in their hands were ready. As they got closer, even without the face scanner, they could hear the sound of those things running and the low growls they made. Bang, 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 bang. Before those things completely came into sight, the group opened fire. If they waited until they really saw them before firing, it would be too late. Everyone was an experienced hunter. Even new members like Silin, Ba Dao, and Xiao Shang had a lot of experience, so they did not panic at all in this situation. Their hands holding the guns were steady, and their aim was good. With the positioning signal on the masks, although it was not 100%, it was definitely 99% accurate. The display of the heat signal also allowed them to seize the opportunity to shoot those things when they were not blocked by thick trees. After so many years of experience, they tried to minimize the wastage of ammunition. However, this time, they had no choice. After shooting those things, they didn't die. Although there was a moment of pause, they were still full of momentum. It seemed like they wouldn't give up until their last breath. Dias calculated that it would take about 5 bullets to kill one of them. He was sure that he had hit the heads of those things every time, but they did not die. They would only stop after the 4th or 5th bullet. Perhaps they were dead, but Dias was not sure. Based on the speed of those things, the gap of 4 or 5 bullets was enough for them to get closer. Moreover, there were only 12 people on their side. Not everyone could kill 3 of those things before they reached them. Silin had already killed 2 of them. His firing rate was very fast, so fast that the others suspected that he was wasting ammunition. In fact, according to Silin's heat signal, as long as those things were not blocked by trees, even if it was only for a moment, Silin would shoot them. He even calculated the speed of the bullets and the running speed of the things, so it was almost accurate. Moreover, Silin had locked onto 3 of them at the same time. When the others killed one, he was already on the 3rd. Finally, the first one jumped out of the bushes. Silin and Xiao Shang shot it almost at the same time. Probably because it had been shot before, it was shot twice more before it fell to the ground. Dias did not have the time to take a closer look at these things. With just a quick glance, he knew why these guys were so resistant. Chapter 94. That thing looked very strange. Its head was simply too small compared to its entire body, and a thick layer of hardened keratin almost covered its entire head. At the back of its head, the keratin layer and bony plates extended backward, covering 1/3 of its torso. It was spread out at a certain angle so that it could easily block all the attacks from the front. The parts that were not covered by the hardened keratin layer looked extremely thick. Although the 2/3 of its torso did not have thick keratin armor, there were many protruding thorns, making it look even more ferocious. Their legs were thick and short, and the soles of their feet were shaped like hooves. Overall, they looked very cumbersome, but no one would have thought that such a seemingly cumbersome fellow could run so fast. This thing was very well armed. Some people had once said that small animals had low intelligence. In order to survive, they would evolve their bodies into a strict defensive state, making up for their lack of intelligence with the defense of their bodies. Scylla did not know if these things had high intelligence, but even if they were not, they were definitely not idiots. When they attacked, they aimed their heads at the enemy and attacked in a straight line. They tried not to expose the parts of their torso that were not covered by the hardened keratin layer. Although it was only a short glance, everyone had their thoughts. After all, they were veterans, so there was no need to say much. They adjusted their angles and continued to shoot. This time, the focus was on their legs. If they were accurate, one bullet would be able to make them lose their ability to move. In fact, it was not a bad idea to shoot their limbs, but the bushes and some dense grass in the forest covered their thick and short limbs very well. Even the heat sensor might not be able to accurately sense them all the time. Fortunately, there were only about 30 of them. If there were more, they would have to fight in close combat. When they finally got rid of these guys, everyone let out a temporary sigh of relief. However, they did not dare to relax too much. Temporary peace did not mean temporary safety. A few people walked over and shot the ones that were still breathing. Diaz walked towards the closest one. This one was the closest to them, so it was also the one that suffered the most. Looking at the thick keratin covering that thing's head, Diaz fired a shot. Seeing the effect of this shot, everyone was speechless. Based on the gun in his hand, a single shot was enough to leave a huge hole in the chest of those polar bears, but when it hit this thing, it only took off a piece of its skin. If he shot the same spot a second time, he would be able to penetrate the skin, but he didn't know how deep it would go and how much damage it would cause. After all, when it was alive and in a state of attack, the tension of its muscles was different. Perhaps it had some life-saving skills. If there's another wave of these things, we might have to use armor-piercing bullets, someone sighed. Micro-armor-piercing bullets were not used to deal with armored vehicles or some armed aircraft. Instead, they were specifically used to deal with creatures covered in armor, including humans and some other creatures. However, everyone had a limited number of armor-piercing bullets, so they hadn't used them before. I really didn't think that there would be such well-armed creatures on this planet. That hardened stratum corneum and bony plates are way too hard. If these things were as dense as rats. Carrie didn't finish his sentence, but everyone shuddered at the thought. How terrifying. As Carrie spoke, the detectors sounded an alarm again. This time, it sounded very urgent. This alarm meant that a foreign life form was approaching. It was the same as the previous alarm, but the previous alarm didn't sound this urgent. What's going on? Someone said. Everyone entered a state of high alert. But not long after, black bugs the size of a fist burrowed out of the ground. These bugs crawled out of the places where the dead creatures were lying. The black bugs burrowed into the wounds of the horny creatures. Not long after, a large number of black bugs wrapped around the creatures, and then the pile of creatures shrank at a speed visible to the naked eye. When these bugs finished eating and burrowed back into the ground, all that was left was a layer of stratum corneum and bone. These were the forest cleaners. As long as any animal died, they would burrow out of the ground and eat the dead animal. Then, they would return to the ground and hibernate, waiting for the next feast. Carrie let out a long sigh of relief. That scared me. As soon as he said that, the alarm sounded again. This time, it wasn't urgent, but that didn't mean it would be easy. There's no end to it, Carrie said angrily. Scylla frowned. He had just heard the sound of a bird. Although it wasn't loud, probably from a distance, and it was short, it was definitely the kind of bird he had seen before. It's a snake. Damn, these snakes can change color. Through the scanning, the mask revealed the true appearance of the newcomers. It was difficult to accurately spot these snakes with the naked eye. Snakes were temperature-changing creatures, different from the heat signals released by the horny creatures. But the scanning device still displayed them perfectly on the mask, so everyone could know the specific location of these snakes. Fuck, why are there so many snakes? I didn't see a single one before. Why did so many suddenly appear? That's right, why? Everyone was puzzled. But while they were puzzled, they still had to deal with it. Since it was just snakes, there was no need to retreat. Don't use the flamethrower. Use ultra-low temperature condensation, Diaz said. Got it. Everyone took out a tube-shaped object. When the snakes came within 15 meters of them, They pressed the button on the tube, and white mist sprayed out. When the snakes came into contact with the white mist, they instantly hardened and froze. If the snakes behind wanted to come over, they could only go around the frozen snakes in front. Because even if they hadn't come into contact with the frozen snakes, the previously active snakes couldn't take it anymore. The temperature was too low. With the ultra-low temperature condensation, it didn't take much effort for the group to freeze the snakes. After the snakes were frozen, they smashed them with telescopic sticks. Looking at the white chunks that were smashed on the ground, Diaz waved his hand and continued forward. But after a few steps, the alarm sounded again. One wave had just subsided, and another wave had risen. It was the horny creatures from before. But this time, there were more of them, no less than 100. Carrie looked at the miniature submachine gun he was carrying and sighed. The bullets of the submachine gun were really useless against these creatures. It was better to change to armor-piercing bullets. Retreat, Diaz said immediately. This kind of environment was too disadvantageous for them. At the same time, Diaz also sent out a distress signal, asking for help. He also sent some information about these horny creatures. Outside the planet, on the starship, Schotten looked at the situation of the 6 teams on the screen. Of the 6 teams, 3 had sent out distress signals. Schotten estimated that the remaining 3 teams wouldn't have it easy either. It was only a matter of time before they called for help. Second team, get ready. After giving a few instructions to the people beside him, Schotten took his equipment and went to support the second team. Chapter 95. In the forest, Diaz opened the subspace container in his hand and took out the ammo inside for everyone to replenish. Logically speaking, subspace containers on planets with a habitability rating of A and below would be unstable. Therefore, most people would only use subspace containers on habitable planets. For planets with a habitability rating of B and below, opening a subspace container would involve different degrees of risk. Even so, Diaz still opened it. If they did not replenish their ammo, it would be difficult for them to have time to replenish their ammo once they started fighting. Fortunately, the activation went smoothly. Although there were some effects and it was not very stable, they were able to take out the items. Vice Captain, it's not just one side that has those things. Xiao Shang exclaimed. The scanner showed a few more dots. After a second scan and cross-analysis of the parameters, they confirmed that these were indeed the creatures with keratin on their heads. They had formed a fan shape and surrounded Diaz and the others. They were either surrounding them or forcing them to the back. They're forcing us back, Xiao Shang said. Yes, if they were only surrounding them, why were they only forming a fan shape? If they were forcing them back, then what would be waiting for them? Although they did not know, it would definitely be more dangerous and disadvantageous to them. They could not retreat. They were in a dangerous situation now. If they retreated, they might be in a situation where they would most likely die. It seemed that these guys were quite intelligent, far higher than they had imagined. After replenishing their ammo, if their aim was good, they could finish them all off with micro-armor-piercing bullets. But this time, these guys seemed to be chasing after their lives. They were even faster than the previous ones. Bang! The bullets struck the hard surface of the horny creatures' heads and drilled through them, entering their heads. Killing one with one shot was indeed a lot easier. However, there were too many of them, and the distance between the two sides was still shrinking. Even though there were only 12 of them, they still had a certain level of confidence in facing those guys with no less than 300. At least the situation was not too bad. Just as they had this thought, the alarm sounded. This time, what the scanning system showed made their hearts sink. Behind these horny creatures, another group of unknown creatures came. They were very fast and did not move in a straight line. The most special thing was that although the unknown creatures behind them were not running in a straight line and were dodging, they were still running toward them in a fan shape. Not long after, everyone saw the creatures running from behind through the telescopic system. They were larger than the horny creatures. Excluding the spikes on their backs, these horny creatures were about 1 meter tall, while the creatures behind them were more than twice the size of the horny creatures. If these horny creatures were partially armed, then the ones that came later were fully armed. Damn it, these guys are wearing armor at the end. Moreover, the armor was a lot more difficult to deal with than those guys who only had their heads and torsos equipped. Its body was covered with a hard red and black substance that looked like a crystal. From its appearance, it looked a little like a leopard. Carrie took out another type of bullet. This type of bullet looked similar to the armor-piercing bullet, but the color of the bullet was different. Each bullet had a special symbol on it. Bang! The bullet hit one of the big guys, penetrated the thick hard surface, and went inside before exploding. Blood spurted out of the creature's mouth. A lot of the hard red and black substance on its body was lifted up due to the internal shock, but its body did not seem to have been blown into pieces. Of course, even though it looked fine, its internal organs were blown up. It moved around for a while before it stopped moving. When the others of its kind saw this, they sped up again and ran with more skill, agility, and leaping ability. It was very difficult to lock onto them and shoot them. The 2 shots that Carrie fired later did not hit their targets but hit the tree trunks instead. The resulting explosion did not affect those creatures much. As long as they missed, even if the explosion happened right next to them, it would not hurt them much. The hard protection on their bodies allowed them to avoid the damage of such an explosion. Due to the red and black monsters coming from behind, the horny creatures running at the front became even more desperate. The horny creatures at the front were the ones who died, and they were also the ones who attracted most of the firepower. There were more than 20 monsters at the back, and this was only what they could see. Diaz did not know if there were more hiding outside their scanning range. Perhaps there were some lying in ambush at the back. Up until now, Carrie was the only one who had killed one first. They were having a hard time fighting 2 of the creatures at the same time. The 2 sides were getting closer and closer. Retreat first. Stall for time. The captain and the others will come to support us. Diaz roared. He had no other choice now. If they did not fight while retreating to find suitable cover, it would be very difficult to deal with them once they got close. The monsters behind them could probably kill them with a single swipe of their claws. Climb up a tree? Impossible. They would be dead meat if they did that. No matter how thick a tree was, it would not be able to withstand the claws of these things. Moreover, based on the movements of those creatures, they could also climb up trees. Perhaps they were much more agile in trees than they were. Hoverboards? Although they brought them, they did not dare to use them. If they wanted to fly, they could only fly above the forest. Judging from the jumping speed of those things, they could reach a certain height as long as they borrowed the strength of the tree trunk. Meanwhile, many birds had gathered in the sky above the forest at some point. They could only see their shadows flashing by through the gaps between the leaves. However, everyone knew that as soon as they went up, they would become the target of a multitude of attacks. In the air, humans were not as agile as those big birds, so they would only die even faster. Although they knew that there would be more difficult situations ahead, they had no other choice. Now that they had been forced to this point, they could only take one step at a time and wait for reinforcements from the back. Boom! Someone used a shoulder cannon. Although shoulder cannons were more destructive and definitely more lethal than bullets, they were not very effective against those big guys. The reason was because of the terrain and environment here. This was a forest, and there were thick tree trunks everywhere. Those big guys had very sensitive senses and dodged very quickly, so it was very difficult to really lock onto them. The energy bullets that hit the tree trunks would at most cause some damage to the horny creatures in front of them, but they would not cause much actual damage to the big guys. At most, they would peel off some of their hard skin. However, if they used the shoulder cannon, they would be able to wipe out some of the horny creatures in front of them first, which would reduce their burden by quite a bit. They had already eliminated 3/4 of the horny creatures in front of them, and they had yet to deal with the monsters at the back. The 12 of them alone would not be able to handle them. One of the big guys running at the back ran into one of the plants with red and white flowers when it was dodging bullets, and it directly used its 2 claws to tear the plant in half. This made everyone realize just how difficult it would be to fight these guys in close combat. Even a rank A genotype would not dare to fight them head-on without a weapon, not to mention that the other party had the advantage in numbers. Ba Dao's extra 2 pairs of hands came into play. Although his accuracy might not be as good as Silin's, it was still an extra helping hand. Silen's rapid fire had killed most of the horny-skinned beasts on his side, so the others should be able to deal with the remaining horny-skinned beasts. After reloading, Silen aimed his gun at the big guys behind the horny creatures. They were very alert, especially when they saw Carrie kill one of them with a single shot. They became even more vigilant, and they were very sensitive to being locked onto. Before Carrie could fire, they had already dodged to the side. Bang! A hole was blasted open on the head of one of the big guys, and the dark red hard substance on its skin splattered everywhere. Due to inertia, it rolled on the ground twice before it stopped moving. It did not even sense that it had been locked onto, and it was suddenly shot while it was running. Bang, bang, bang. Another 3 shots were fired in quick succession, and 3 more big guys were shot and fell to the ground. After Silen killed 7 of them, the remaining horny creatures and the big guys covered in hard substance caught up to them. Clang! Sparks flew when the wrist blades that popped out cut into the skin of these big guys, which showed just how hard their skin was. Although they managed to cut in a little, the wounds were too shallow. Unless they were all cut in the same spot, they would not be able to do much damage even if they were torn apart. Extremely low temperature condensation and flames were not very effective against them, and their surface defense was too good. Fortunately, Silen had taken care of 7 of them, and together with the one that Carrie had taken care of first, there were still 15 left. The horny-skinned beasts did not stop there. Instead, they continued to run, so the group only had to face these 15 big guys. Although they were wearing protective suits, the group's dodging speed was still very fast, and they were looking for points of attack as they dodged. Perhaps they knew that Silen posed the greatest threat to them, so 3 of them attacked Silen. Using the recoil from the wrist blades hitting their bodies, Silen jumped up and fired a shot into the mouth of one of the big guys that was pouncing at him. The impact from the bullet's explosion lifted countless small pieces off its hard surface, and dark red blood and internal organ fragments also sprayed out of its mouth. After that shot, Silen did not stop. He dodged the one that was coming at him from behind, stepped on the tree trunk with his foot, twisted his body, and quickly jumped up to dodge. Then he fired another shot at the one that was pouncing at him from the side. This series of attacks was extremely fast. Even Diaz would have a hard time doing this while wearing protective suits. The big guy that was pouncing at him had already leaped off the ground, so it could not dodge instantly and was shot directly. He put away his wrist blades, and at the same time, 3 small hooks popped out and hooked onto the thick tree trunk next to him. He turned around along the trunk and fired another shot at the one that was about to make a move. Diaz, who was fighting a big guy, roared in his heart, "I haven't even taken care of one, and that kid has already taken care of 3. After taking care of 3, Silen found an opening and helped Xiao Shang take care of 1. That big guy's mistake was that it should not have sent Xiao Shang flying at that moment, giving Silen the opportunity to take care of it. If the 2 of them were too close, it would not have been easy to shoot. "Silen, go help Carrie. There are 2 attacking him." Xiao Shang roared. They thought that Carrie was the first to kill one, so the big guys classified Carrie and Silen as dangerous. The most threatening one was Silen, so they sent out 3 of them, followed by Carrie, so 2 of them went to deal with Carrie, and the remaining one was a one-on-one. Carrie? That guy was pushed too hard by 2 of them, so he should have retreated a little further than everyone else, but he should not have retreated beyond the range of the scanner, right? In terms of flexibility, Carrie was not as good as Silen, so the only thing he could do was to prevent the 2 from attacking him from the front and back. However, this guy could not have retreated so far that he could not even see his shadow, right? Chapter 96. The further he went, the denser the grass became. From the knee-high grass, Silen followed the traces left behind by the creature. It didn't take long for him to see a dead alien beast covered in black and red scales. Judging from the signs, this big guy was indeed killed by a bullet that exploded from the inside after it was shot. Black bugs crawled out of the ground and were eating. The strange thing was, not far from where the big guy died, the traces on the grass changed. They looked like they were dragged. There were many broken vines in the surroundings. Although these vines weren't thick, they were very tough. The broken parts of the vines weren't smooth, and it looked like they were forcefully broken. After tracking for a while, Silen saw another big fellow. It had also been shot and died from an internal explosion. From this point onwards, there were clear signs of struggle in the dragging traces. Pushing aside the grass, Cylin discovered 3 deep scratches on the ground. They were probably left behind by Carrie's claws when he was being dragged by the vines. Just a few steps later, Cylin found a severed vine in the bushes. The cut was very smooth, so it should be Carrie who cut it with a knife. Further ahead was a steep slope. Below the slope was a green river. The river wasn't wide, but the current was very fast. Cylin found Carrie's gun on the slope. Carrie must have rolled down the slope and fell into the river. The protective suit was waterproof, but after all this, Carrie's protective suit must have been seriously damaged. The positioning device on his body didn't respond either. Cylin turned on the communicator to leave a message for Diaz, but he found that the communicator was buzzing and the signal was in chaos. What's going on? Forget it, let's not worry about it for now. Cylin had installed a message button at the slope. If Diaz and the others had finished their business on the other side and followed the trail here, they would definitely discover this button. Cylin exhaled and looked down the river, hoping that Carrie was still safe. How is Carrie now? Carrie's current situation was very bad, very bad. When he was chased by the 2 big guys, his feet were tied up by the vines under the grass. But thanks to these vines, the speed at which his feet were tied up was very fast. Carrie didn't need to pay attention to his feet. He could focus on the 2 big guys behind him. The 2 big guys were obviously also troubled by the vines, which gave Carrie an opportunity to take advantage of. Otherwise, with the speed of those 2 beasts, they wouldn't have been destroyed so easily. However, success was due to vines and also due to vines. Carrie's protective suit was torn by a big guy, but he wasn't scratched. When the vines wrapped around Carrie, the capillaries on the vines pierced through Carrie's skin, which was not protected by the protective suit. The neurotoxin penetrated deep into Carrie's body, so when Carrie cut the vines, his consciousness was already blurred and he was in a trance. After staggering a few steps, he rolled down the steep slope and fell into the river. Before falling, Carrie pressed the life button with difficulty, and a life buoy surrounded him. He didn't know how far he was washed away, but Carrie's A-rank genes played an advantage, and the trance caused by the neurotoxin in his body began to lessen. If a person below C-rank suffered from this toxin, they probably wouldn't last long before dying. After recovering some consciousness and physical strength, Carrie pressed a device on his arm, and a drill with a rope flew out. The drill shot into the stone wall next to the river and drilled into it. Then the rope retracted and pulled Carrie to the shore. After climbing ashore and retrieving the drill in the stone wall, Carrie looked above the stone wall. Above it was the forest, similar to the steep slope that he fell down. However, Carrie planned to stay here for the time being. What if he went up and encountered those big guys again? He didn't know if the communicator was broken or there was no signal, but there was no response. Taking a breath, Carrie looked at the dark green river. The river was a bit strange. The speed of the river had decreased a lot, and it was almost flat. Carrie saw a bunch of egg-sized emerald green objects floating towards him from the river. Although his vision wasn't as sharp as usual due to the neurotoxin's influence, Carrie was sure that there were no such things just now. The emerald green objects on the river surface increased, and they gathered toward Carrie. Fuck! No matter how confused Carrie was, he knew that these things were not good. He flicked the drill hook again and threw it toward the steep slope above the stone wall. After pulling it up the slope, the claw hook popped out from his wrist, and he climbed up the slope bit by bit. What if he accidentally fell down again? After climbing up the slope, Carrie lay on the ground beside a large rock. He felt like a puddle of paste, and he had no strength left. Although the symptoms of the neurotoxin had lessened, and his consciousness was much clearer, he still felt weak all over. He didn't know where the firearms on him were. If he encountered those hard black and red alien beasts again, only death would await him. In his current state, it was difficult to even cut a fruit with his wrist knife. As Carrie was thinking, he heard a familiar low growl. It was the kind of growl that was slow and rhythmic like breathing. Auditory hallucination? He listened attentively and raised his head. What a tragedy! Carrie wailed in his heart. He had just thought of these guys and they had appeared. One knew through the. What happened to Diaz and the rest? Why were there 6 of them here? If it was possible, Carrie wanted to grab the cannon and fight it out with these guys. He would die without regrets. However, the current situation made him feel very unwilling. The 6 black and red alien beasts were not in a hurry to pounce on Carrie. Instead, they slowly walked towards him. Their gazes made Carrie feel like he was a stupid monkey for others to watch. Gazes? Carrie looked carefully. Indeed, the gazes in their eyes were not like those of ordinary animals, but more like the eyes of humans. That was called, yes, spirituality. That was what Yudi said. Seeing the 6 big guys slowly approaching, Carrie slowly propped up his upper body, leaned his back against the rock, and flicked out his wrist knife. In fact, his entire arm, which was connected to the wrist knife, was trembling. The neurotoxin had not been completely cleared, and his muscles were still twitching. However, there was still a grenade in the bag at his waist. In such a situation where death was certain, some people would choose to commit suicide, but not Carrie. He would fight to the end, even if he had to die together with his enemies. This was his belief, the belief he had chosen when he walked the path of a hunter. Seeing Carrie flick out his wrist knife, the 6 big guys revealed looks of disdain. Come on, you ugly guys. When they were within 10 meters of him, Carrie's other hand without the wrist knife turned to the grenade, ready to press the button. Roar, a long roar, like the roar of an ancient giant beast. The sound wave almost burst Carrie's eardrums. However, hearing this sound, Carrie almost cried. A gray figure flashed. Bang! Out of the 6 exotic beasts, 1 was sent flying, 1 was stepped on, and the other 4 were forced 20 meters away by the sound waves coming straight at them. The streamlined body glowed with a metallic luster, with a different kind of elegance, looking down at the 4 black and red alien beasts 20 meters away. Chapter 97. Carrie stared blankly at the gray fellow in front of him that was even bigger than the red and black exotic beasts. From its appearance, it looked a little like a cheetah and a little like a lion. Its skin had a metallic luster, but it felt very soft, like liquid metal. Moreover, it didn't look as ferocious as the red and black exotic beasts. However, why did that sound so much like that gluttonous Huimao? In the roar just now, the high-frequency sound waves were only directed at the red and black exotic beasts and not in Carrie's direction. Otherwise, based on Carrie's current state, he would probably die on the ground with blood flowing out of his orifices. This big fellow with a metallic luster knocked a red and black exotic beast into the air and even stepped on another one under its claws. The hard surface of the exotic beast that was stepped on was cracked, and many red and black fine pieces were peeled off to the side. It clearly didn't look as ferocious as the red and black exotic beasts, and its body was only slightly bigger. However, its domineering aura was displayed to the fullest. Under its elegant appearance, it couldn't hide its arrogance and recklessness. It exerted force under its claws. Crack, crack, crack. A cracking sound came from the red and black exotic beast under its claws. Black-red blood flowed continuously from its mouth, and its sharp white teeth were dyed red with blood. Roar, a miserable howl resounded through the forest. Even Carrie felt a chill run down his spine when he heard the voice. The birds circling in the air hurriedly cried a few times and flew away in a hurry. The 4 red and black exotic beasts bared their teeth and let out a low roar. The big metal fellow looked at the red and black exotic beast that could no longer move under its claws. With a cheese sound, it extended its scythe-like claws. Carrie felt that the big metal fellow laughed disdainfully when it looked at the 4 red and black exotic beasts in front of it. Then, its claws swept across the red and black exotic beast that had lost its ability to move on the ground. Carrie was dumbfounded as he watched the red and black exotic beast that even his wrist blade couldn't finish off in one go be cut into pieces. It really was like cutting a fruit, and there wasn't a single trace of blood on its claws. After it was done, it even looked at the 4 red and black exotic beasts in a threatening manner. It didn't roar or bare its teeth. With just a simple glance, the 4 red and black exotic beasts turned around and ran away. Yo, what a mess! After absorbing the white ball, Huimao's metal form had become even more perfect. Without that kind of mechanical roughness, it looked smoother. Listening to the familiar voice, Carrie was still a little unsure. Snore? It's Hubie Lou. Huemao's body slowly shrunk, returning to its original cat form. However, even this small cat form could not conceal its arrogance. It was clearly much lower than Carrie's, but Carrie felt that this fellow was still looking down on him. Carrie smiled and accidentally choked. He coughed twice and then looked at Huimao, who was licking his claws and wiping his face. Wheeze, come and give me a hug. Hold my ass. I could have eaten all 4 of them, but because of you, I had no choice but to spare them, Huimao said unhappily. Sillin told it. Focus on Carrie's comfort. Don't just think about eating. Then I'm really sorry. I dragged you down. Even so, Carrie didn't feel very apologetic. He was very grateful to Huimao for saving him at a critical moment. At the same time, Carrie also understood what Sillin meant when he said, when in danger, that cat will show mercy and save your life. Why don't I treat you to a feast next time when I have time? At least you know what's good for you. Huimao's tone showed that he was giving him face. By the way, how did you find me? Carrie asked. Sillin sent a sonic signal flare. I only found out that something happened to you when I came over. I was wondering how something could happen to Sillin so easily with his ability. Where's Sillin? I'll be there soon. After Sillin handed the task of finding Carrie to Huimao, he returned to check on Dias's situation. If he was looking for Carrie, Huimao would have an advantage. Moreover, Sillin believed in Huimao's ability. Before he left, he added, other than eating and sleeping, prove your worth. If you can't even save a person, you can stay here and live with the Ultra Beasts. Huimao was so angry that he almost chopped down all the trees in the area. Not long after, Sillin came looking for him. He and Huimao had a special connection. This was also why Huimao said that they were the same kind. After checking Carrie's physical condition, Sillin was relieved when he found that there weren't any particularly serious injuries. The vice captain and the others should be with the captain now. The reinforcements are here, and they came directly with the aircraft. I left a message for them and left a signal transmitter along the way. This place is very strange. There's a strong interference effect, but as long as they fly over here, they should be able to receive the signal within a small range. Knowing that everyone was fine, Carrie was also a lot more relaxed. Wheeze is very strong. Huimao squinted his eyes, enjoying Carrie's scratching of his chin surface. When he heard this, he snorted. Sillin glanced at the two and shook his head. He then walked to the red and black Ultra Beast that Huimao had chopped into pieces. I really don't know how many of these things there are. There were 6 of them just now. If it wasn't for Wheeze, I would have been dead, Carrie said. No, it's not. These 6 are not the group we originally encountered, Sillin said with a frown. Group? They are social animals. The forest that we passed through before was a group. There are many smells in the air, including the smell of their territory. However, the smell on this one doesn't belong to that forest. Carrie's face twitched. He thought that his sense of smell was very sensitive, but he really did not smell anything special. Of course, apart from the smell of blood. They're very intelligent. At the beginning, they were probably driving the horny-skinned beasts to test us. It's not that those horny-skinned beasts are intelligent. The real masterminds are these guys and those birds in the sky. Sillin pointed above his head as he said this. The snakes we encountered were thrown down by those birds circling in the sky. With the cover of the dense branches, those snakes wouldn't fall to their deaths even if they fell from the sky. These snakes should be very familiar with the smell of those horny-skinned beasts. They will chase after the smell factor in the air. And these snakes are also testing us. Carrie's mouth was wide open. Weren't these red and black Ultra Beasts a little too cunning? Then, for the 3rd time, they drove out even more horny-skinned beasts to exhaust our weapons and ammunition. At the same time, they closed in on us in a fan shape, forcing us back while preparing to attack from behind the horny-skinned beasts. It's like they're hunting. While they're hunting, they'll force us towards the steep slope. There will be vines entangling us along the way. They'll watch their prey struggle and force them into a corner step by step. Their goal isn't to eat, but to enjoy this pleasure and learn from it. Carrie felt a chill in his heart when he heard this. After being a hunter for so long, this was the first time he was counterattacked by an ultra beast and ended up as prey. Captain and the others are coming. Sillin looked at the sky and turned around to help Carrie up. They used a hoverboard, and the two of them and one cat flew towards the slowly descending spaceplane that opened its hatch. Seeing that both Carrie and Sillin were fine, Dias's worried heart finally relaxed. Let's return to the starship first. The situation this time is a little complicated. Chapter 98. The 6 advanced teams all suffered casualties. Other than Dias's team and Lu Sua's team, the other 4 teams all suffered from varying degrees of death. After returning to the starship, Carrie was sent to the emergency room for treatment. Dias followed Shotten to the main starship, while Sillin stayed with the rest of the team. Sillin, it's all thanks to you this time. Otherwise, our team would have lost a lot of people. Xiao Shang smiled at Sillin. His face was filled with exhaustion and joy. Not long after Sillin left, Shotten brought the others over in a spaceplane. The remaining red and black exotic beasts stopped fighting and quickly fled. Sillin waved his hand. Is everyone all right? Their wounds have been treated. The more serious ones are still in the emergency room, but their lives are not in danger. Where's Beaver? He's in his private workshop. He's processing the data he brought back. A copy of the data was sent to the technical analysts on the 6th team's main starship for analysis. However, Beaver was itching to do the analysis himself. Sillin went to Beaver's workshop and knocked on the door. Generally speaking, Beaver did not like to be disturbed when he was working. Therefore, the doorbell was set to silent, so Sillin could only knock on the door. After knocking for a long time, Beaver finally opened the door. His eyes were bloodshot. It seemed like the data analysis was not going well. What? Beaver asked weakly. It was too mentally exhausting to analyze so much data in such a short period of time. Moreover, it was still chaotic. He kept feeling like something was missing. Let me borrow your analyzer to analyze a piece of audio. Sillin did not walk into Beaver's workshop. It was Beaver's private, forbidden area. Other than Dias, no one else had entered it. Even the 6th team's leader, Shotten, was not included. Audio? What audio? There were some audio recordings in the information Dias and the others collected, but they were all the sounds of the horny-skinned beasts and the red and black exotic beasts. It's a bird. Beaver's eyes flashed. Go sit in the cubicle next door. I'll analyze it immediately. Nodding, Sillin walked to the cubicle next to Beaver's studio. Hey, why are you being so secretive? Why aren't you letting me in? Huimao followed Sillin in and jumped onto the table, asking Sillin to pour him a glass of juice. After licking it twice in a picky manner, he raised his head and said to Sillin mysteriously, Do you want me to eavesdrop and see what data you're processing? Eavesdropping? You can find out what he's dealing with through listening? Sillin was surprised. Huimao raised his head as if he was the #1 expert in the world. Of course, all machines will make a specific sound, and the data they process will be spoken through language. It's just that you guys don't know about it. You guys can only know the calculation results and part of the process that are displayed on the screen. Then wouldn't we be able to eavesdrop everywhere as long as we invent a device that can receive and translate this machine language? Hearing Sillin's words, Huimao looked at him with disdain. Let's not talk about whether or not those low-grade machines can hear. Even if they can hear, they might not be able to understand it. For example, can you understand the indigenous language of those remote planets? In other words, the language produced by different machines is different. But why can you understand it? Agreeing with Huimao, Sillin knew that it was not easy to understand that kind of machine language. Otherwise, the League of Stars would have invented that kind of eavesdropping device a long time ago. There was something else that Sillin was puzzled about. Beaver's studio had very good soundproofing, so how did Huimao hear it? Or could it be that this kind of machine language was not sound waves? I don't know. I just know that they are talking and I can understand them. This is the ability of the miracle life of the universe. Sillin rubbed his chin. Just as Huimao was about to float with pride, he grabbed one of its ears and changed the topic. Actually, you are hiding something from us, right? What? No way. Huemao's arrogance was blown away by Silin's words. You are trying to cover it up. I know what you are thinking in your head the moment you move your ears. Nonsense. How is that possible? Huimao tried hard to control his ears and maintain a normal state. Look, your whole body is tense, as if I have seen through your thoughts. Silin pressed a button, and a mirror appeared on the wall. In the mirror, Huimao looked like he was frozen and was suspiciously stiff. You don't even know how to lie. You are so stupid. You call yourself a centuries-old cyborg life form. Huimao opened his mouth and tried to relax his body. Then, he hugged his head on the table and curled his body into a ball, ignoring everyone. Looking at this guy's awkward look, Silin flicked the tip of Huimao's ear in amusement. Alright, don't be shy. This is also a learning process. If you meet some crazy researchers, they will dig out all your information with just a few words and then dissect you in detail. Silin didn't want to scare it, but some of the researchers in the League of Stars were too crazy. They would really do anything, no matter the cost, by hook or by crook. Huimao's situation was too special. Compared to the cyborg life forms that had been recorded, Huimao definitely had more research value. He belonged to a different kind of existence. Silin was afraid that one day in the future, if everyone didn't have the ability to protect Huimao, this guy would be able to survive with his own ability. He wouldn't be sold by someone and still have to pay for the person. Huimao's claws that were hugging his head loosened, but his body was still curled into a ball. Silin rubbed Huimao, who was curled into a ball hard, still throwing a tantrum like a child. After a pause, Silin smiled and said, You actually found a mine, right? How did you know? Huimao suddenly raised his head. Silin smiled but didn't say anything. He was just speculating based on various situations. As for what exactly it was, he didn't have a conclusion. However, since Huimao had this reaction, it was true. I've read some articles in high-contribution journals. Some researchers say that in some high-energy states, cyborg life forms will be forced to turn into a carbon-based state. That's because in that state, their mechanical form will be seriously affected. Huimao thought about it and shook his head. I don't know. I don't have that kind of feeling. Even though I wasn't used to it when I was near the mine area, I'll be fine after some adjustment. It's nothing. If that's the case, it might be the function of the white sphere. Yes, it must be. Let's not talk about the white sphere. About the energy mine, if I can guess it, those experienced analysts should be able to guess it as well. Huimao was stunned for a moment. Then he shouted, It's all your fault. If you didn't call me over, I could have gone to mine the mine. I let them have it for free. Silin reached out and knocked on the cat's head. You still say them? No matter what, they are part of this hunter team. If the team can find the mine, it will be very beneficial for their future development. Without the energy mine, whose starship will you fly around? If you collect the energy mine, won't you eat it? Huimao thought about it and agreed, but he was still a little unwilling. He whispered, I can get the energy mine to repay my debt. Alright, don't worry about it. Silin rubbed Huimao's head. You saved Carrie and found the mine. I'll give you a 100 million off. Really? Huimao's eyes lit up. It had only been a short while, and he could repay 1/5 of his debt. It seemed that the day when he would be free from debt slavery was not far away. As they were talking, Silin and Huimao sensed movement beside them and stopped talking. Soon, Beaver came over and said excitedly, The analysis is out. I've also figured out some of the problems. Silin, let's go find the vice captain. This is an important clue. Silin did not leave. You go find the vice captain first. We'll announce the results when the time comes. Alright, I'll go first. Silin, you've done a great job this time. Beaver was very excited to be able to analyze more information than the analysis team on the 6th team's flagship. Watching Beaver leave, Silin sat down again. He already knew what Beaver had analyzed. He had passed the audio to Beaver to analyze so that Beaver could tell Diaz about the missing information. However, it seemed that the real important thing was not the beasts. Chapter 99. Without waiting for Beaver to leave the team's starship, Diaz returned. After communicating with Beaver for a while, he called all the team members over and summarized the results of the analysis team and Beaver's analysis for everyone. What we faced before was a highly intelligent species. It wasn't just one, but two species acting in concert. The so-called highly intelligent species was the standard used to measure animals, not humans. A highly intelligent species might not necessarily be smarter than humans, but they were definitely not stupid either. Diaz pulled up the images of the red and black exotic beasts and the birds in the sky on the big screen. There are also two images taken from high up in the sky. I believe everyone will have a better understanding of them after seeing them. In the image, there was a basin with many stone circles made out of huge rocks, and the horny-skinned beasts were being kept in the stone circles. Outside the stone circles were some red and black exotic beasts pacing back and forth. The image changed to a cave. Around the cave were birds that resembled eagles of prey. They used their sharp beaks and claws to tear the horny-skinned beasts apart before tossing them into the cave. The series of actions were very practiced, and it was obvious that they had done this many times before. The team did not know what the depths of the cave looked like, but from the creatures that crawled out of the cave, everyone knew that this was a snake cave. There were many snake species that would not eat dead or still objects, but it was obvious that this was not the case. When the minced meat was tossed down, they fought to snatch it. Neither of these two creatures are at the top of this planet. There are many creatures that are larger and more lethal than them, but these two creatures are living very well. The reason is because of their cooperation, a mutually beneficial symbiotic relationship. When the birds encounter their natural enemies, they will run to the red and black exotic beasts for protection, and when large beasts that pose a threat to the red and black exotic beasts approach, the birds will also warn them. After a long period of evolution, they have become more and more adept at interacting with each other, and at the same time, their intelligence has also increased. Diaz switched to another image. This is the scene when the team leaders came to support them and they retreated. Look at the eyes of this big guy when they retreated. It was a kind of unwillingness to give up, just like a human's. An animal's intelligence can be reflected in its eyes. The higher its intelligence, the stronger its ability to learn. When the Miantuan saw the look, it quickly hid beside Beaver's trousers. What a scary look, as if it was going to jump out and eat it. As for Huimao, he only glanced at it calmly, then yawned and went back to sleep. Sleep after eating. Yes, that was the truth. No wonder I felt like I was being played. Carrie sighed as he sat on a chair after treating his wounds. Yudi gave him a sideways glance. Now you know the consequences of a hunter having a lower IQ than his prey? Carrie's face twitched, and he wished he could slap himself. Why did he speak at this time? Wasn't this purely asking for contempt? The members of the team thought deeply about what Diaz said. This meant that they were going to face two highly intelligent animals that cooperated with each other. At the same time, they did not know what other trump cards these two creatures had. However, if they wanted to understand this planet with a level B habitability, they had to face these two creatures. Many people were deep in thought after listening to him, and so was Sillin. However, it was not because of what Diaz had said, but because of something else. Although his eyes were fixed on the big screen, his attention was on the data monitor that he could not see on the other side. That was the monitor that they had sent to orbit the planet. As it orbited the planet, it monitored some of the conditions on the planet, such as the general image, local weather conditions, energy detection, and so on. Ever since we spoke the machine language, Sillin had paid special attention to it. When his concentration was at its peak, he really could hear some things. When he converted these things into words and images in his head, he could see some vague images that he couldn't see clearly at all. Even so, it was enough to excite Sillin. He was sure that it was the machine language that Huimao had mentioned. Huimao, who had been sleeping on his stomach, twitched his ears, and his closed eyes suddenly opened. He looked at Sillin with a strange gaze, but he seemed to understand something and immediately felt relieved. He buried his head and continued to sleep. After explaining it to everyone, Diaz's expression turned serious. Sillin thought the real show is coming. Diaz cleared his throat and said solemnly, After saying so much, let's get to the main point. According to the analysis of the mainship's analysis team, there may be a large amount of energy ores on this planet. It's just that for some unknown reason, we are temporarily unable to detect them. Therefore, our next mission is to return to the planet for further energy detection. The technical team has already modified the detection parameters and optimized the detectors. The new detectors will be sent over tomorrow. Before the detectors are sent over, everyone should rest well. Once we return to the surface, we will have to face more than just these two intelligent lifeforms. The moment the gray cat heard the word energy ores, its ears immediately perked up with a whoosh. Although it still had its eyes closed and head buried, its ears betrayed its current mood. Seeing this, Sillin sighed inwardly. As expected of a cat. After the small team meeting, Sillin returned to the lounge and sat down. Hui Mao jumped onto Sillin's lap. Are we only looking for one of the energy ores? Sillin thinks for a moment and said, I don't know, but the 6 teams will be sent out separately to explore different areas. Maybe the other teams will be in charge of other energy ores. How many do you know? Sillin had seen the images taken by the orbiting detection satellite and a few simple parameters. From these parameters, Sillin speculated that there might be more than one energy ore, but he did not know how many there were. After all, the data was limited. He believed that the mainship's analysis team would have a more accurate conclusion. However, compared to the analysis team, Sillin trusted Hui Mao's judgment more. Hui Mao narrowed his eyes. The area I ran was limited, but within this area, I found 2 types. One is in that forest, and the other is in that green river. Sillin nodded. These 2 places were indeed strange. When he thought that so many energy ores would be confiscated, Hui Mao was a little dispirited. Seeing that Hui Mao was a little unhappy, Sillin pulled its ear. If you can find the energy ores before the detectors, you can eat some first. Really? I won't be kicked out of the team and thrown to stay with those ugly people on the planet? Don't worry, as long as you limit your appetite, I believe the captain and the others will understand. What a joke. Who would be stupid enough to kick a cyborg out? There were many smart people in the team, and they knew what was at stake. Hee, all right, I'll definitely find the energy ores before those stupid machines. When the time comes, I'll eat first and tell you guys when I'm full. Great, this guy was getting carried away again. Stupid, just keep that last sentence in your heart. Don't say it out loud, you'll get beaten up. Sillin cupped Hui Mao's head and said, Yes, keep it in my heart. I'll say it in my heart next time. I won't say it out loud. Hui Mao was happy and did not mind Sillin beating its head. During the time they returned to the surface of the planet, Hui Mao was always in a state of excitement. It patrolled the starship 3 times a day, but everyone was used to it. Carrie even brought food for Hui Mao every day to thank it for saving his life. When the Hoodie spacecraft landed on this piece of land again, the hatch opened and Hui Mao ran away. Chapter 100. Due to the importance of the energy ores, the 6th team had even sent out fighter jets this time. There were aircraft and fighter jets in the air, and the birds wouldn't hover above them to inform the red and black exotic beasts to cooperate with them. The red and black exotic beasts only watched from afar and didn't come over. They knew that it wouldn't end well for them if they forced their way in. Tang Qiuqiu followed beside Dias. She held a gun in her hand, but her eyes were curiously looking at the plants around her. She had seen some strange plants in the videos before, and seeing them with her own eyes gave her a different feeling. Well, she had to record more videos as souvenirs. This area was the territory of the red and black exotic beasts. No matter which group they belonged to, they wouldn't act rashly if they saw such a situation. It was precisely because they were smarter than the other animals that they wouldn't act rashly. Without the threat of these 2 exotic beasts for the time being, Dias's team could spend more energy searching for the energy ores. For the sake of these energy ores, they had even sent out some technicians. They had wanted to send out some robots as well, but the closer they were to the ground, the greater the interference the machines would receive, and their programs would be a little messed up. This was something that would happen in a high-energy field. This was also the reason why they rarely used weapons that could trigger the energy ores here. In the end, they still rejected this idea and sent out manpower to search for the energy ores. However, even after modifying the parameters and optimizing the detector, it still didn't show any specific information. It couldn't detect the specific location, and it only showed that there were energy ores. If they were to blindly mine, they would probably use up all the energy they brought along. By the time the manpower they had mobilized was almost exhausted, the energy ores might not even show up. Yudi held the detector casually. Right now, he was only holding it for show. From the looks of it, the modified detector by the technical team wasn't of any use at all. If they were to continue searching like this, they might starve to death and still not get any results. The Miantuan lay obediently on Yudi's shoulder. It didn't want to be left on the starship, but it was too timid. Once it got out of the aircraft, it stayed close to Yudi. It didn't dare to run around randomly like the Huimao. 8 hours later, Diaz sighed. There was still no progress. If it really didn't work, he could only ask for permission to open a few random holes. Both fighters and spaceplanes consumed a lot of energy. If they couldn't find any energy here, then they would have suffered a great loss. They still had to stay in Sector Z for a while, and if they couldn't replenish their energy and deplete their reserves prematurely, then they would face a very difficult situation. DDD, the alarm indicated that there were animal life forms coming their way at high speed. The members of the advanced team, who had similar experiences before, reflexively tensed their nerves and quickly adjusted their state of mind. They ignored the detectors and prepared their firepower first. It couldn't be helped. Once bitten, twice shy. It was just a conditioned reflex. Could it be that there were waves and waves of traps waiting in front of him? Wait, it's Wheeze. Sillin motioned for everyone to calm down. That guy probably found the energy ores. The first sentence did relax everyone's taut nerves a little, but the second sentence was undoubtedly another bomb. They had wasted 8 hours exploring with the detectors. In order to record accurate data and send it back to the starship for parameter calculation and further upgrade of the detectors, everyone was on foot. Not only did they have to be vigilant of the animals and plants around them, they also had to keep an eye on the detectors for minute changes. It was practically exhausting. But the cat that ran away the moment the hatch opened could find the energy ores? If that was true, then they were practically trash compared to a cat. A gray shadow flashed by and jumped onto Sillin's shoulder. It was none other than Huimao's Wheeze. Sillin raised his hand and placed it next to its mouth. Then, Huimao spat out a fingernail-sized black and red crystal with a spit. After checking the size of the crystal, Sillin glanced meaningfully at Huimao. Huimao turned its head and looked at the surrounding scenery with an innocent expression. It had indeed eaten a meal before coming over, and when it came over, it had specifically bitten off a crystal the size of an egg. However, as it held it in its mouth, it had unknowingly absorbed some of the crystal, reducing it to the size of a fingernail. When Huimao spat out the small crystal, everyone's eyes were focused on Sillin's hand. Sillin handed the crystal to Diaz. Diaz carefully took the small black and red crystal. It was obviously a deep black and red, but it gave off a sparkling and translucent feeling. At the same time, it was so deep that it was full of fatal temptation. Diaz slowly brought the small black and red crystal in his hand closer to the detector. When it was about 5 meters away, the detector suddenly had an abnormal reaction. As the distance got closer, the detector's sound became more rapid and sharp. After a rapid high-frequency sound, the detector exploded. At this time, the crystal in Diaz's hand was still more than 3 meters away from the detector. Only less than 2 meters could cause such a huge change. It had to be said that this energy ore was amazing. What a powerful energy field. Everyone's eyes shone. An energy ore of this quality only needed a cube that was about 1 meter long to make up for all the energy they had used up since they entered Sector Z. This reminds me of those black and red alien beasts, and those horny-skinned beasts with slightly black keratin and bony plates on the front half of their bodies. Maybe it's because of this energy ore buried under the ground that the high energy field produced by this energy ore had stimulated them to develop hard epidermis even when they couldn't sense the existence of the energy field. After a long period of evolution, this hard epidermis gradually developed completely. Yudi analyzed. Other than the animals, the plants in the forest are also slightly hard. Maybe it really is because of this energy, or if this guess is correct, then we have truly found a treasure. Diaz looked at the black and red crystal in his hand and said excitedly, "The appearance of every new high-quality energy ore would set off a wave, and the sixth team's trip this time was definitely not in vain. As long as they could get their hands on this energy ore, their sixth team would be able to stand tall in the entire Vanguard Hunter Regiment even if they didn't gain anything else in Sector Z. Wheeze, you really are the treasure of our squad." Ha. Carrie tossed the detector aside and walked over to scratch Huimao's chin. Huimao narrowed his eyes in enjoyment, but Sillin knew that it wasn't Carrie's praise or chin scratching. It was because the cat had eaten its fill and was thinking about sleeping. "Hey, Wheeze, where did you find this? Bring us over to take a look." Diaz spoke to Huimao in a tone one would use between friends. He didn't mean to order it at all. He knew that this cat was special. Huimao swatted away Carrie's hand, tilted its head and scratched its neck with its hind legs. Then, it yawned and stuck out its butt, stretched its waist and smacked its lips. Finally, it said slowly, "Sure." It jumped down from Sillin's shoulder in a flash and ran in a certain direction. "Hurry up and keep up." Diaz directly used his hoverboard. Those who had hoverboards behind them also used theirs and flew over. Those who did not have hoverboards returned to the aircraft and followed the people who were in front of them. Huimao led them through a series of twists and turns until they reached a certain part of the forest. The density of the trees there was very high, and the trunks of the trees were getting thicker and thicker. Everyone had to squeeze in one by one. Those who were slightly fatter or those with more developed muscles might not be able to make it through. When Diaz wanted to use his knife to chop off a few branches, he realized that the trees there looked similar to the trees in the forest, but they were at least 10 times harder. Diaz didn't order them to cut down the trees on a large scale. His intention was to first find the location of the energy mine and then deal with it according to the situation. Just as Diaz felt that his bones were starting to deform from being squeezed, Huimao turned to look at him. "You can't squeeze in anymore?" That's fine too. There are energy ores all over this area." After taking 2 deep breaths, Diaz asked, "The range of energy ores starts from here." Huimao had an innocent look on his face. "No, it starts from the place where some of you with more developed muscles couldn't squeeze in." Diaz. His eyes nearly rolled back and he vomited blood. Diaz was filled with regret. The place that Huimao had mentioned was more than 500 meters from where they were. In other words, when he had squeezed so hard that his internal organs were about to deform, he was told that he had squeezed for more than 500 meters for nothing. "Why didn't you say so earlier?" Diaz gritted his teeth. "Because the quality of the energy ores there was not good. The one I gave you is better than the one there. However, you still have to go further in." Huimao didn't seem to have done anything wrong. Beside him, Sillin shook his head. This cat was really slow. It just looked smart. Chapter 101. Diaz, with a face full of resentment, squeezed his way back to instruct his men to start mining. Mining in this place was not an easy task. Diaz sighed in his heart. There were so many technicians and so-called professionals, but they could not even compare to a simple-minded cat. As for Sillin, who had a strange bone structure, Diaz and the others had always thought that Sillin was born with the ability to change his bone structure and body shape. Sillin followed Huimao and continued walking. Diaz did not say anything. It was always better if someone could follow the cat and see what was going on. As they continued walking, even a person as thin as a bamboo pole might not be able to squeeze in. Many times, Sillin's bones would be dislocated in order to pass through the narrow gap and then straighten again. If Diaz and the others knew that Sillin was playing with his bones like a jigsaw puzzle, their jaws would probably drop to the ground. "Ah, it's here!" Huimao shouted from not far ahead. Sillin took a few more steps forward and realized that from this point onward, there were no trees. The ground was covered with a layer of rocks, which looked similar to the rocks in other places. Sillin took out his knife and stabbed it into the ground. The rocks here were very hard, and even if he stabbed for a long time, he might not be able to stab very deep. If he used too much force, the knife in his hand might even break. Below the rocks was a layer of rock. According to Huimao, the black and red energy ores were below this layer. Silin could also feel that this place was different, and some of the factors in his body began to stir. If this was the core of the black and red energy ores, it was hard to imagine that the strength of the energy fields in this vast forest, as well as the large area around it, was similar. Other than the core area, the energy fields covering such a wide area further highlighted the uniqueness of the energy ores. This rocky area was not exposed to the outside world. The sky was densely covered with spreading branches, which was why this rocky area was not found in the images taken by the orbiting satellite probes. In the middle of the rocky area, there was a hole that had been dug. It was Huimao's masterpiece. Silin walked to the side to take a look. The rock layer was about 15 meters deep, and below that were the black-red energy ores. However, that was only the information that Silin could glean from the cave walls. As for this hole, the black-red energy ores that extended from 15 meters underground to 30 meters underground had all been destroyed by Huimao. At this time, the cat jumped in and continued to eat, as if it was chewing on ice. If Carrie saw this, he would probably worship it again. No matter how intelligent an animal was, it would not eat energy ores as if they were food and crunch them loudly, right? Silin jumped into the cave and touched the black-red cave wall with his fingers. When we spat the red-black energy into his hand, Silin didn't test it because he was being stared at by so many people. In fact, a series of changes had started happening inside Silin's body the moment he came into contact with the energy. It was as if he was trying to absorb all of the energy inside the energy. If Silin had not forcefully suppressed this change, by the time it landed on Dias's hand, it would have shrunk to the size of a grain of rice. Silin could feel the boiling factors in his body yearning for this kind of energy. Although Silin did not understand what would happen, he knew that it was definitely not a bad thing. When he touched the black-red energy ores on the cave wall, the cold feeling from his fingers did not last long before it was replaced by a scorching heat. Silin felt like there was a whirlpool in his body, crazily absorbing the energy contained in the black-red energy ores that his fingers touched. This kind of energy made the chips in his body become active and stimulated the metabolism in his body. At this moment, Silin could feel that there was no change in his genetic information, but the information that was transcribed from his DNA was different every time. In other words, every time it was transcribed, the original information would be automatically edited, so that the final information that was transcribed would be different. This seemed to be an experiment, using the energy absorbed to supply energy for the experiment. At the same time, this energy also provided a comparison, so that each experiment would get closer and closer to the point that this energy measured. The chips integrated into his genes stimulated some of the silent areas in his genes to start expressing themselves. At this moment, Silin felt as if he was being painted layer by layer, and then this paint seeped into his body. Not only the surface of his body, but the organs in his body, from the tissues to the cells, were all undergoing strengthening experiments over and over again, until the most suitable and most advantageous point was found. Huimao, who was originally leaning on the cave wall and gnawing on the energy ores, suddenly felt that something was wrong and turned his head. What the heck? Huimao was so shocked by Silin's current state that he slipped and fell from the cave wall. Fortunately, he was a cat, and after twisting his body and landing on the ground, Huimao immediately ran to Silin's side. However, he did not get close to Silin, because there was a strange aura around Silin at this moment. Moreover, Silin's entire body had turned black-red, and the color was deepening until it was almost the same color as the energy ores on the cave wall. Huimao circled around Silin twice, then sat down helplessly. He propped himself up on his forelimbs and stared unblinkingly at Silin, who was touching the cave wall with one hand, eyes closed and brows furrowed, and his entire body was black-red. At the place where Silin's fingers touched, the cave wall began to slowly sink inwards. Then, around Silin's fingers, the depression began to gradually expand. Huimao knew that this was because Silin had absorbed all the energy contained in the energy ores. However, even if it was Huimao, It had only eaten them first, then digested and absorbed them. Although the absorption was fast, it was not as efficient as this fellow, right? What the hell was this fellow doing? Why did he need to consume so much energy? As he watched, Hui Mao fell into deep thought. Yes, it thought that it was deep thought, but according to Silin's standards, it was actually in a daze. Pain, intense pain. It was as if every part of his body, from the inside to the outside, was being torn apart and reassembled once again. Silin had always felt that if he wanted to activate the remaining portion of the chip, he might need to increase his stamina or work hard to upgrade his gene to A rank. However, he had always neglected one thing. The small portion of the chip that had yet to be activated was also the most crucial part. If he wanted to activate it, not only would it be a matter of increasing his strength, he would also need a large amount of energy. However, the energy that could allow the activated chip to automatically experiment until the main body was upgraded to the most suitable point was no ordinary energy. At least until now, other than this black-red energy or all the energy ores that Silin had come into contact with before, regardless of whether they were good or bad in the eyes of others, could not be activated. Chapter 102. Within his body, the experiments led by the AI chip were carried out again and again, and Silin was enduring more and more pain each time. However, Silin was very happy. He knew that this was not a bad thing. This was also the most important opportunity since he had been injected with the AI chip for more than a year. He did not know how long this pain lasted, but suddenly, a feeling of enlightenment came over him, and he instantly felt a sense of comfort. At the same time, the black and red color on the surface of Silin's body slowly faded until it disappeared, and Silin seemed to have returned to his original appearance. Silin stretched his arms a little. He felt good, very good. Even if he was not in a solidified state, he believed that his current body would be able to withstand even stronger attacks. He was very clear about his current state. Although the AI chip in his body had been activated a little, it was still in an incomplete state. However, Silin was also satisfied. This opportunity allowed Silin's gene rank to evolve again after more than a year. Rank gene? Yes, the A-rank gene that many people yearn for even in their dreams. For Silin, the shadow hunter who had once lived in a poor little town and could not see the light of day on that underdeveloped planet, it was indeed a distant existence. However, that time, he had met Ori and was injected with the AI chip as a test subject. His gene rank had jumped to B rank, and now it had evolved again to A rank. However, Silin was still clear-headed, and this situation was only temporary. Whether the existence of the A chip was ultimately a blessing or a curse, Silin himself could not say for sure. Letting out a long sigh, Silin looked at Hui Mao, who was sitting there in a daze with his front limbs propped up. He knew that this fellow had slipped away again. Hugh! Hui Mao, who was in a daze, suddenly heard a loud shout accompanied by sound waves. He immediately arched his back and jumped high in the air. Silin held back his laughter. This fellow was really scared. After Hui Mao landed on the ground, he huffed and puffed a few times. Then, he turned his head and jumped onto the stone wall to vent his anger on the energy ores, expressing his emotions very well. I am not in a good mood. Hui Mao probably knew that he was in a daze and jumped up reflexively because of a cry. He felt very embarrassed, so now Hui Mao was throwing a tantrum again. All right, Wheeze, don't be angry. Let's go and find the vice captain, Silin said. Hui Mao ignored him and continued gnawing on the black and red walls of the mine. Snore. Hui Mao flicked his ears and continued to ignore him. Silin sighed. Even though it was a cyborg, it could not get rid of the fact that it was a cat. Cats were a little willful and did things their own way. You clearly heard it, but you pretended not to know. You're so awkward, and you even bear a grudge. Walking over, Silin directly pulled Hui Mao down from the wall of the mine and jumped out of the cave with it in his arms. Although Hui Mao, who had a "I don't want to talk to you" attitude and had pointed its tail at Silin, was dragged out of the cave by Silin like a child, Hui Mao only struggled a little symbolically to express its dissatisfaction. However, it was not stupid. Now was not the time for it to gnaw on the energy ores unscrupulously. Since Sillin gave it a way out, Hui Mao also gave face and stepped down. Of course, this gave face had always been what Hui Mao thought. When Sillin and Hui Mao saw Dias was discussing mining matters with a few team members and technicians. There was a tree that had been cut in half and left there untouched. When Sillin arrived, Dias and the others had just come to a decision. They would start digging a mine at the periphery where the trees were still sparse, and then extend the mine underground to the place where the ores were stored until they reached the central area Hui Mao mentioned. Only then would they start mining on a large scale. Otherwise, it would be too much of a waste to only get the low-quality ores after spending so much effort. Also, if they were to cut down the trees in the forest, Dias was worried that it would expose the mineral deposits in this area. After all, Vanguard's 6th team was not the only one who had entered Sector Z. If there was another company who happened to find this planet and effortlessly set their eyes on these mineral deposits before they reported to the A Squad, then the 6th Division would die an unjust death. After Dias contacted Schotten also agreed to this method. Because the energy ores were too special, it was best to conceal them as much as possible. Sillin talked to Dias alone and explained to Dias that Hui Mao could eat energy ores. Otherwise, how was he going to explain to the team that there was such a big hole there? Moreover, Sillin thinks that Dias had learned about Hui Mao's situation from Carrie a long time ago. He knew that Hui Mao was a cyborg. Since they knew about it, then smart people like Dias and Schotten would naturally know the value represented by cyborg lifeforms. It would be a great help to them in the end. Right now was the time for the 6th Division to work hard to develop. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in such a hurry to recruit talents. However, Sillin's own secret couldn't be exposed, so he could only let Hui Mao suffer. Of course, Sillin and Hui Mao had discussed this. As for taking the blame, Hui Mao didn't say anything, but he didn't object either. He just remained silent because he was still at odds with Hui Mao. Sillin knew that this guy had actually agreed. He rubbed Hui Mao's head and said, "When the time comes, they will ask you to look for the other kinds of mineral deposits." Hui Mao's ears pricked up. Of course, it could hear the hidden meaning in Sillin's words. It could eat them again after it was found. Dias's team was very excited about mining. The whole team had recovered from their previous depression, so everyone's attitude towards Hui Mao was very good. They knew that this cat was not ordinary. Thanks to this cat, their team was the first out of the 6 teams to discover the mineral deposit and start mining. "Vice Captain, the captain is looking for you." A team member came over from the aircraft on a hoverboard and handed the communicator to Dias. The closer they got to the mineral deposit, the stronger the signal interference. Therefore, in this area, communication equipment was not very good. If they wanted to communicate, they could only fly into the air and stay further away from the ground. Unlike the forest where the signal was intermittent, there was no signal at all around the ground. Dias accepted the communicator, launched his hoverboard and flew into the air. A while later, he came down and said to Sillin with a smile, "You and we should head over to the other squads. Their exploration isn't going too well, so a spaceplane will come and pick you up later. Is there a problem?" Before Sillin could answer, Hui Mao agreed eagerly. It was obvious that he couldn't wait. Dias moved closer to Hui Mao's ear and whispered, "When you eat, be discreet. Take turns to work. If there's anything, look for Captain Schotten." Hui Mao's round eyes were bright, and he said in a tone that said, "Of course." 5 minutes later, an aircraft flew over. Sillin and Hui Mao boarded it on a hoverboard. After the aircraft flew away, Beaver said doubtfully, "There's something wrong with Sillin. Feels different from before." "Of course." Dias smiled happily. "That guy has already evolved to rank A." Sillin did not deliberately hide it. There was a slight resonance between rank A and rank A genes. This slight resonance did not exist among the ranks below rank A. As long as one did not deliberately hide it, if the other party was sensitive to this slight resonance, they would be able to detect it. That's good news. Our team is going to make a name for themselves. When that guy was rank B, he wasn't any weaker than Carrie. "Vice Captain, I think Sillin is our team's lucky star," Carrie said. Diaz raised his head. Of course. Don't you know who discovered this star? Chapter 103. On the spaceplane, Shotun looked very happy at the data displayed by the energy analyzer in his hand. He promised repeatedly that he would not mistreat the gray cat as long as it could find the source of the energy. He even promised to give the gray cat tens of thousands of JL credits. Although this amount of money was too little for the gray cat since it had always measured money in the hundreds of millions, it was still meat no matter how small a mosquito was. The gray cat accepted the money out of respect, and most importantly, Shotun allowed it to give the gray cat special treatment openly. When he found out that Silin's gene level had evolved to grade A, Shotun congratulated him happily and did not ask too many questions. The first place they arrived at was where the Cold Beauty Ash's team was. Previously, Ash's team had landed at a place where the rivers crisscrossed. From the sky, all they could see was a green river. Unlike the creatures in the forest, which had hard skin on their bodies, there were not many animals with hard skin on their bodies in this green river. Some small mammals like rabbits were active in the area around the river. However, they had a special characteristic: their bodies were generally green. The creatures in the river were not to be underestimated. Just like the green blobs that Carrie had encountered before, they all carried deadly toxins. One of the members of Ash's team had almost lost his life in the hands of these small blobs. These green blobs were originally flat like leaves in the river. However, when they discovered prey on the surface of the water, they would fill their bodies with gas and float to the surface of the water. Then, they would swim toward the prey and inject the toxins into the tissues of the prey, causing these parts to become soft and fluid for them to absorb. There were many hidden dangers in the river, especially a type of large jellyfish. Their long tentacles would extend out of the water to capture the land creatures that were closer to the river. There were also some amphibians that Asha and the rest had been guarding against. When Silin and Huimao arrived, Asha and the rest were resting at a place far away from the riverbank. Shotun asked them to stop what they were doing and wait. Up until now, they had made no progress in their exploration. Moreover, 10 minutes ago, they had exchanged fire with more than 10 frog-like big guys. Asha and the rest had been exploring for a long time, but they still had no idea where to start. The technicians were sweating profusely and constantly changed the parameters of the detector to better match the situation here. However, the results were not satisfactory. When they heard that Captain Shotun had a solution, they could finally rest more comfortably. However, they did not expect that the solution that they had been waiting for was a cat. They had also heard that Diaz's team had a cat that always followed the Miantuan into trouble. Asha looked at Huimao, who was sniffing left and right on Silin's shoulder. She frowned and said nothing. Shotun said to Asha, "Get everyone ready. We're going to start looking for oars. Those who have hoverboards, get on the hoverboards. Those who don't, get on the aircraft. Also, get your weapons ready in case those things in the river come out and cause trouble again." After saying that, Shotun turned to look at Huimao with a smile. "Wheeze, please." Huimao ignored him. After sniffing and confirming a direction, it jumped down from Silin's shoulder and ran in a certain direction. Silin activated his hoverboard and followed behind. Shotun signaled for everyone to follow. However, Shotun did not get on the aircraft. Instead, he activated the hoverboard in his backpack and chased after the gray shadow with Silin. Huimao only wanted to find the energy ore as soon as possible, so it chose the shortest route, a straight line. Regardless of whether it was land or a river, Huimao was still traveling in a straight line. Because of this, everyone was surprised. At first, Shotun was going to ask someone to help clear away the green obstacles next to Huimao, but Silin said that it was fine and that the little guy could handle it. What happened later proved that it was true. Fuck, this cat could actually swim, and it swam faster than fish in the water. Fuck, why was the cat covered in those green obstacles? It shook itself on the shore and was completely fine. What kind of cat was this? It could actually swim in such a dangerous place as if it was playing. When the jellyfish reached out their skilled hands, the people in the sky fired their guns. Although everyone's target was the jellyfish, it was still a jellyfish and a hail of bullets. If it had been someone else, they would have been scared out of their wits, or at least panicked. However, this cat continued to swim as usual, turning a deaf ear to what was happening around it. It was very calm. Looking at Silin, it was true that the cat was like its owner. It was as calm as the wind without a trace. Not long after, Huimao stopped on a piece of land at the junction of two rivers. Then Huimao began to dig a hole. Its two front paws were like drills, and in a short while, it had completely drilled into the ground. Asha and the others watched with their mouths twitching. This cat, not only was it good at swimming like a fish, it could also dig holes like a mouse. Shotten gestured for everyone to wait on the surface. Silin looked around. There were no trees or tall plants on this piece of land. It was covered with a thick layer of something that looked like moss. A technician used an instrument to measure it. The photosynthesis of this moss-like plant was actually more than 200 times faster than that of normal moss. Previously, they had discovered that the concentration of oxygen in the air near the river was very high, but that level of oxygen concentration was still bearable. However, the oxygen concentration here was too high. If this continued for a long time, everyone would suffer from oxygen poisoning. Therefore, everyone put on a mask. The mask would adjust the oxygen concentration in the air to an acceptable range. After about an hour, Huimao jumped out and spat out a small emerald green piece in front of Silin. Even though it was such a small piece, it seemed to reflect a lush world that was full of vitality. Seeing this emerald green energy, or even the usually calm Asha, could not help but feel excited. She had never seen this kind of energy or before. This was the energy or that they were looking for. Although it was only slightly more than an hour, it was enough for Huimao to have a good meal down there. Since they knew that there was an energy or here, Shotten, Asha, and the others began to formulate a plan. From time to time, they would ask Huimao about it. Huimao licked his paws and wiped his beard as he answered lazily. "How does the ore taste?" Silin asked. Huimao smirked. "The taste is not bad. If the black and red energy ore is meat, then this emerald energy ore is vegetables. Just like how I occasionally eat vegetables. Eating vegetables helps to reduce internal heat, and it's also beneficial to me. Indeed, cats would sometimes eat grass." Huimao jumped onto Silin's shoulder and whispered into Silin's ear, "Swim to the bottom of the river. You'll be able to reach the energy ore." Silin thinks for a moment, then walked over to Shotten and said, "Captain, Wheeze and I will go down to the river to take a look. It's said that we might be able to reach the energy ore from there." "That's a good idea. Although it will be more difficult to mine from the river, it will be more hidden. Should we send someone to help?" Shotten said. "No need. Wheeze and I can handle it." "All right, be careful." After Silin and Huimao jumped into the river, Asha said, "You trust him that much?" Whether it was his ability or his character. Shotten smiled. "I trust Dias." Asha was silent after hearing that, but her furrowed brows were smoothed out. Chapter 104. Silin followed Huimao downstream. With his current physique, he could withstand the water pressure and dive for a long time without relying on a mask. Therefore, when Silin jumped into the water without wearing protective clothing or a mask, and without using a small submarine, some people on the shore were a little dumbfounded. Although it was only a river, its depth made many people flinch. The further down they went, the less light penetrated. At first, there were some dense water plants on the stone walls, and some plant-eating fish were looking for food around the water plants. As they continued to go down, the water plants decreased, and the surroundings became darker. This kind of environment made the hidden murderous intent in the darkness even stronger, and people could not help but feel anxious and panicked. However, Silin and Huimao did not feel the slightest bit of such emotions. There was no need for an underwater searchlight. With just a little bit of light, Silin could clearly see this area, and the source of this little bit of light was some glowing river mussels attached to the stone walls. Those magical light sources were what they used to attract prey. Perhaps it was because there were energy ores here, so these river mussels had evolved special suckers to attach to the walls. You would be wrong if you thought of them as normal river mussels. These river mussels ranged from 1 meter to 5 meters in length, and Silin could clearly see that there were some barbed teeth hidden inside their shells. When a prey came close to the mussel, These sharp teeth would firmly hook the prey in place. There was also the clamping pressure of the mussel shell. In this part of the river, there should be very few prey that had fallen into the trap and escaped. As soon as he turned his head, Scylla found that the stupid cat had come close to the mussel, and only its fat but 2 hind legs and tail were exposed. Knowing that there was no one else here, Huimao became angry. His whole head directly turned into a mechanical form, and it was the enlarged type. He swallowed the whole mussel and then returned to his small cat form. Not far away, there was a fish almost 10 meters long swimming in this direction, ready to sprint to catch prey. When it saw this scene, it flicked its tail, turned around, and ran away. It seemed that the intelligence of the animals here was not low. Huimao shook his head. He was very unhappy about being caught, but he went up to it out of curiosity. In the end, he felt that the mussel was not bad, but he was caught before he could bite into it. Huimao turned around and swam 2 steps. It stopped and spat out a green bead. It was the thing inside the mussel. Celine caught the orb before it could sink into the ground. Pearls? Scylla looked at this green bead. It didn't have any energy fluctuations, but it had a feeling of vitality. Obviously, it couldn't emit light, but because of the reflective effect, it reflected the light emitted by the mussels next to it with a kind of psychedelic brilliance. What is this? Even though they were underwater, Huimao's words were not affected. Scylla made a gesture. It was a gesture that Huimao was familiar with. It meant money. In other words, this thing was worth a lot of money. Huimao didn't look for energy ores anymore. After it came close to the bead and sniffed, it spread its limbs and began to search along the mussels one after another. However, this time, it wasn't stupid enough to go close directly. Although these mussels didn't cause any harm to it, it was embarrassing to be caught. This one doesn't have it, and this one doesn't have it either. Oh, this one does, but it's too small. As long as there was a green pearl, Huimao would directly swallow the whole mussel and then spit out the pearl. Eat the mussels, keep the valuable things. In the end, Huimao directly swallowed all the mussels with the green pearls, and then spat them all out for Scylla. This was what it needed to repay its debt. After a while, Huimao finished his inspection. He counted a total of more than 20 mussels. Many of the mussels didn't have green pearls, and among these 20, most of them were on the small side. There were only 5 big ones. Scylla put all these into the leaf ring. This was Huimao's personal item, but after the debt was paid, it would belong to him. Waving his hand, Scylla and the gray cat continued to dive deeper. As they continued to dive, Scylla could clearly sense the energy ores wrapped inside the layer of rocks. He didn't know if it was because his genes had evolved to rank A under the influence of the red and black energy ores, but Scylla could also sense these energy ores. He hadn't said anything before, and everything had been guided by the gray cat. But in reality, Scylla could also sense the energy ores on this side. Maybe his senses weren't as clear as the gray cat's, but he had definitely sensed them and had a clear direction. Even Huimao didn't know about this. In the 6th team, Huimao was the only one who could clearly feel the energy ores. This way, Huimao's role would be highlighted, and the team would place Huimao in a higher position. It's here. But the quality will be better if we go further down. Huimao dived straight down. Scylla didn't stop until he was close to the bottom of the river. Scylla only stopped. The quality of the energy ores here was quite good. Although there were more down there, it wasn't necessary. You absorb it, I'll be on the lookout. Huimao's back was facing Scylla, and he looked at the huge object that was slowly approaching from the darkness in the distance. He was very excited. This thing that was approaching seemed to be quite tasty. Scylla used his bare hands to break open the hard outer layer of the rock. Slowly, a palm-sized area that was glowing with green light was revealed. Scylla placed his hand on the surface. The factors in his body had already begun to clamor. As soon as Scylla released the seal, the energy within the ore surged toward Scylla. The changes that happened to his body when he absorbed the energy were similar to before. The only difference was that the green energy ore could activate the AI chip to produce an optimal memory point that stimulated the human body to recover its vitality. In other words, If Silin was in some kind of life-threatening situation, this memory point would be activated, and his recovery ability would obviously increase by a lot compared to before. The effects would also be much better. This time, Silin absorbed the energy very quickly. When he opened his eyes, there was already a depression in the area where his palm touched. Sigh, I'll continue to let that cat take the blame for me. On land, Shotten looked at the data that the technician had obtained from the hole that Huimao had made. He didn't speak for a long time. However, he was extremely happy. After being suppressed for so long, he finally saw a gentle light. Whoosh, a 10-meter-long, strange-looking fish with dark green patterns on its body jumped out of the river. No, it was thrown out. When everyone took a closer look, they found that the tail of the big fish was gone. If it was whole, it would be at least 20 meters long. Green blood was still flowing. After it was thrown out, it was still churning. Huimao jumped out of the water and went straight for the big fish. It lay on top of it and continued to chew. As long as it was not dead, the meat was still fresh. Before the fish died, Huimao had to chew more. Looking at this cat and fish, such a sharp contrast in size and such a strange scene, everyone felt a chill run down their spine. As for whether this fish was thrown out by Silin or some other reason, everyone had their own guesses. However, the most important thing now was to mine, so they didn't continue to think about these questions. After Silin went ashore, he told Shotten about the situation at the bottom of the river. The bottom of the river is the territory of this big fish. Looks like we'll have to use some underwater tools this time. Yes, you've worked hard. Take a rest first. We'll go to the next stop in about an hour. The slightly larger specialized underwater tools were all on the starship. Shotten needed to make some arrangements. Silin walked to the side of the big fish. Huimao's eating speed was like a locust passing by. Now, the big fish was no longer struggling and was on the verge of death. Silin cut open the fish's belly and flipped it open to see what was inside. What are you looking for? Huimao licked its lips and stopped eating. It planned to catch another one when it had time in the future and eat it directly at the bottom of the river before coming up. I'm looking for something. Silin continued to look without looking up. Chapter 105. Silin used the foldable knife to look at the thing inside the fish's stomach. This big fish was completely dead, and its body was starting to change. Silin's hand paused, and a black shadow shot out from the fish's stomach. Silin's free hand grabbed it with lightning speed. It was a long thing that was as long as a finger. Its body was dark green, and it looked almost black at first glance. There was a big mouth on its head, and it let out a shrill cry that hurt people's ears. Many people who were busy turned their attention to Silin's hand. Wow, what is this? It looks like it tastes good. Huimao was planning to run to the side to sleep, but when he saw this thing, he ran back. If you want to eat it, look for it yourself. There's more inside, Silin said. Huimao sniffed the smell of this bug-like thing. He didn't care that it was dirty, and he went straight into the fish's stomach to look for food. What is this? Shotten walked over and asked. It should be a kind of parasite. I've seen some people find parasites on the bodies of deep-sea fish. Although this big fish is not in the sea, it's almost there. I heard that the parasites in the deep-sea fish are very powerful. Silin observed the struggling parasite in his hand, and he put a stone next to its mouth. Puff! A hole was bitten out of the stone. Everyone who saw this took a deep breath. Such a powerful thing was a parasite. If it lived in a human body, wouldn't it be dead? No matter how hard a bone was, it wouldn't be enough for it to chew. After Silin cut off its head with a knife, this thing still struggled for a while before stopping. It was obvious that it had a strong life force. Silin used the knife to rummage through the fish's stomach again. The parasites inside were almost eaten by Huimao. This guy was quite fast. Hey, wait, leave me some of that thing. Silin used the foldable knife to knock on Huimao's head. Huimao, who was about to take a bite, spat out the thing in his mouth. This thing tastes good. Of course, these are all things that absorb the host's essence. Silin stored the little green bean-sized balls into a special bottle. These balls were the eggs of the parasite he had encountered earlier. Huimao, who had been tossing and turning in the belly of the fish, was covered in the green blood of the big fish. Sillin kicked him into the river to take a bath, and only allowed him to go ashore after he was clean. After arranging everything here, Schotten brought Sillin and Huimao to the next team location. It was a land of ice and snow. It was also the coldest place on the planet. The area covered by ice and snow was also very wide. Huimao found two kinds of ores there. One was transparent, and the other was white. The transparent ice ore was a special kind of ore, not an energy ore. It could not provide energy, but this ore was very dense, and almost all of it was made up of water molecules. It was a high-density compressed water crystal. If it was turned into a liquid, its volume would expand by 50 to 100 times. If it was placed in an ultra-low temperature environment, it would absorb the ice in the environment, integrate, and slowly expand. It could be said that it was an excellent crystal for storing water. It was very useful for long-distance travel for the fleet. The other kind of white ore was indeed an energy ore. It could emit a cold light source, and objects that were illuminated by this cold light would be instantly frozen. Before this, there were only cold beam guns and airborne cold beam cannons, but there were no cold beam weapons that were more lethal and suitable for installation on starships. This white ore could achieve that effect, and the technical team was preparing to use this or to develop a new cold weapon. Other than this spot, the energy ores at the other team's locations were about the same as before. That was why Huimao couldn't even be bothered to lick them. He was already sick of the taste. Everyone was very excited now that they knew the location of the ores. However, Sillin did not participate in the mining. Instead, he returned to the starship and slept for 2 days. The energy he absorbed had greatly affected the chips inside his body. While his genes were evolving, Sillin needed to control the changes and take the initiative. He could not allow these changes to happen willfully, or he might even turn into a monster when the time came. Schotten had already reported the matter of this planet to the A-Team, and the A-Team immediately sent people to the planet marked on the star map Schotten had given them. What the 6th team needed to do now was to mine while waiting for the A-Team to arrive and hand the planet over to them. Then, they would proceed with the next step of their operation. Sector Z's planning mission hadn't been completed yet. Although these energy ores were enough to raise their influence in the vanguard, they had to finish what they had to. It had to be said that Schotten had chosen the right route back then. From the start of their voyage until now, other than some of their own kind at the outskirts of Sector Z, they had not run into a single hunter regiment for a long time the deeper they went. Right now, there was not a single exploration team like theirs that had come to the planet's surroundings. Sector Z was huge. No one could say for sure what they would encounter in the future, how many sacrifices they would have to make, and how much they would gain in the future. But no matter what, since they had made the choice, they had to keep going. During this time, the logistics team members seized the opportunity to replenish their food supplies. Only with energy and food supplies would they be able to travel more smoothly in the future. A technician had deduced a conclusion based on some parameter changes. Due to the effect of the energy field, there was a limit to the mining rate of the energy ores. There was a critical point to mining, which was also their equilibrium point. If this equilibrium point was broken, the planet would fall into chaos, and humans would not be able to stay on this planet for long. If it was serious, the planet's habitability would drop from rank B to rank C, or even lower. After sleeping for 2 days, Sillin returned to the planet. "Hey Carrie, where's Sillin?" Beaver asked. The man who had slept for 2 days had actually disappeared. That guy has been obsessed with parasites lately, and he went looking for them with NG. The moment he thought of those disgusting bugs, Carrie couldn't help but shudder. At this moment, Sillin was watching NG dissecting a crab. This crab was something he had come across by chance at the Green Riverside. It was nearly 5 meters long, and its entire body was covered in thick green fur. At the side, Huimao was happily tearing off the crab's giant pincers. NG picked out a bug from the crab's lungs. "Oh, I didn't expect to actually have one." NG smiled as he picked out a bug. "I've only seen parasites in ordinary crabs, but I've never seen this one. But it should be about the same. We can study it when we have time. The infection rate and degree of this parasite are very high. They live in the lungs, stimulate and destroy the host's lung tissue, causing coughing and hemoptysis. Some even invade the brain and cause paralysis. The ones NG mentioned were just the ordinary ones. The parasite he was holding was probably much more terrifying. We usually don't bring parasites onto the starship easily. The risk factor is too high, and if we lose control, the entire starship may die. Never underestimate these tiny things. As he was speaking, Silin and NG's communicators rang. Silin turned on the communicator, and Carrie's big face appeared on it. Silin, the A-team is here. Chapter 106. As Carrie was speaking, Silin saw a spacecraft enter the planet from outer space and fly toward the mining site where Diaz was. Silin, do you want to go and take a look? NG asked. Before Silin could answer, his communicator rang again. It was Shotten. Silin, come over here for a moment. Diaz is here. Bring Wheeze with you. Okay, I'll go right away. After ending the call, Silin turned to look at NG. Let's go together. NG nodded and put away the tools in his hands. Hui Mao quickly gobbled up the remaining crab meat and was about to jump onto Silin's shoulder when Silin stopped him in midair. Go take a shower first. If Silin's guess was correct, the A-team's focus this time was not only on the energy ores, but also on Hui Mao. Maybe there were a lot of people in the 6th squad who had overlooked certain aspects of the Grey Cat's performance, or maybe they didn't know much about cyborgs and wouldn't think in that direction. But Silin believed that a lot of people in the 6th squad had already speculated in that direction. Although he felt that the A-team's attitude towards the Grey Cat would be positive, they hadn't truly expressed their stance yet. He was sure that he would know Vanguard's Corps' attitude towards the Grey Cat after this meeting. When Silin arrived at the mining site, Diaz was talking to a technician. When he saw Silin, Diaz put down his work and walked over with a happy expression. Silin, I'll bring you in. The A-team's people said they want to see you and Wheeze. After all, you two contributed to the discovery of the energy ores. Before bringing Silin onto a spacecraft, Diaz patted Silin's shoulder. Don't worry. Everything is better than you think. Of course, Silin understood the hint in Diaz's words. With a smile, Silin made a gesture of acknowledgement. This aircraft did not belong to the 6th Division. Although the structure was similar, the logo on it was different. It was also the symbol of a sharp knife, but there were more lines. Someone on the aircraft was already waiting in front of the hatch. When they saw Silin, they enthusiastically led the way for him. Silin did not know any of the people they met along the way, so they were probably from the A-team. The people on the aircraft only looked at Silin for a moment, then their eyes fell on the arrogant cat on Silin's shoulder. This cat was quite interesting. Silin was brought to the door of a conference room. Here it is, said the man, knocking at the door and shouting at the top of his voice. Chief, here he is. Got it, get lost. Silin had never heard this voice before. The man was still smiling mischievously. He opened the door and said to Silin, I'll be leaving first. You go in. Silin walked into the conference room. It was a small conference room, and there were 3 people sitting at the small table. There was Shotten, and there were 2 people he did not know. Silin could tell that these 2 people were very strong, but they both had their own characteristics. One of them had a very long chin, and his beard was so long that it almost reached his abdomen. The other person wore a large black hat that covered almost half of his face. His eyes were blocked, and his emotions could not be seen. He did not speak, and he was as still as a mountain. However, his presence was enough to make people feel pressured. The bearded man and Shotten were the only ones chatting in the conference room. Silin, come over here and let me introduce you. Shotten pointed at the bearded man. This is Senior Bart, the former commander of the 8th B Squadron. Then Shotten pointed at the person sitting on the chair. This is Senior Songba Leruo, the former commander of the 2nd B Squadron. In a hunter regiment, the older generation was respectfully addressed as seniors because many of the newer generation were brought up by them. Therefore, anyone who was addressed as a senior had great influence in a hunter regiment. Greetings, seniors. Greetings, my ass. Shotten came all the way here, and he can't even bring himself to make a cup of tea. Bart complained while playing with the strands of his beard. Shotten was already familiar with Bart's personality, so he ignored Bart's complaint completely. "Hey, why are you so reserved?" Bart pointed at the chair next to him. Sillin looked at the chair and then at Bart. Then he walked over to another chair and sat down. He did not take the one Bart pointed at. Bart's expression immediately twisted. Shotten smiled happily. Songba Leruo, who had been silent all this time, chuckled and said in a low voice, "I say, bearded man, you lost the bet. Hurry up and hand over the money, or write an IOU. I still have a lot of Vanguard's bills." Bart snorted, "It's just 200,000 gel credits. Why would I not have money like that? Why would I sign something like an IOU?" Bart slapped a debit card on the table. "There's more than 200,000 in here. You two split it and give me the extra. This card looks familiar." Songba Leruo said, "Did you steal Manny's card again?" "With my character, why would I steal her card?" Bart took his arm and said proudly, "She forgot to take her card for lunch, so I brought it over. She only has a few passwords. You can try them one by one." Celine. Just how good are these people's morals? Bart turned to look at Sillin. "Kid, you made me lose the bet. Tell me, how are you going to compensate me?" The chair Bart pointed at had been tampered with. Anyone who sat on it would definitely have their buttocks smashed. However, most people would not be able to tell. Only those with extremely good observation skills or strong senses would be able to tell. "What do you want?" Sillin asked. Bart rubbed his long chin and pointed at Hui Mao, who was sitting on Sillin's shoulder. "I want it." "Sure. It still owes you a debt. You just need to pay it off." Sillin nodded. Hui Mao stared at Bart with his round eyes. "Pay off the debt? That's great. I'll be free after I pay it off." How much?" Bart asked. Sillin stretched out 5 fingers. 500 million galactic credits. Bart's expression turned serious. "Let's not talk about that. Let's talk business." The topic changed so quickly. "Bastard, it's clearly 400 million. No, it should be more than 300 million. Hui Mao slapped Sillin's face with his front foot to correct him. Bart looked at Hui Mao, and his serious expression immediately turned into a smile. "Hey kitty, come here. Let's talk." Hui Mao looked at the person who had no intention of paying his debt. He walked over with elegant steps, stood up, and jumped. Under the gaze of the 4 people, Hui Mao grabbed Bart's long beard and swung it around like a toy. He even pulled on it to vent his anger. "Hey kitty, be gentle. I'm telling you, you have to pay your own debts to show your integrity," Bart said. Shotten and Songba Leruo gave him a sidelong glance. "Integrity? Do you even have that?" Hui Mao tilted his head and thought about it. "That's right. It would be too embarrassing to let others pay for it. It would be beneath his dignity." Letting go of Bart's beard, Hui Mao jumped back onto Sillin's shoulder. "Hey, kitty, don't be angry. If you need anything in the future, just come to us. With our protection, don't be afraid even if the military comes." Bart's words sounded like a joke, but in reality he had already expressed Vanguard's attitude. Sillin smiled and nodded at Bart to express his gratitude. They did not ask too many questions. They just chatted casually and conveyed their attitude. It didn't take long for Sillin to leave the meeting room. After Sillin left, Bart's playful expression turned serious for real. "Shotten, we received news on our way here that Poison Fong has entered Sector Z." Chapter 107. Poison Fong was a very special organization. There were hunters, assassins, rebels, and even retired soldiers among them. These people had complicated backgrounds, but they shared a common characteristic: madness. Madness that did not take life seriously at all, be it other people's lives or their own. Poison Fong's symbol was a bloody skull with 2 fangs growing out of it, making it look like a devil. Every Poison Fong member wore a bloody skull emblem on their body, and this emblem was made from a certain part of their own bones. Poison Fong originated from Sector V, and it was a gathering of madmen from all walks of life. They carried with them the cruelty and slaughter of Sector V, and they would do anything to achieve their goals. In their eyes, both the army and the 4 great hunter regiments were the same, targets to be slaughtered. Other people would have to think twice about sacrificing 800 men to inflict 1,000 damage on the enemy, but Poison Fong was more than happy to do so. This was also a headache for the military and the hunter regiments, who would be so bored as to risk their lives against them. It would be fine if these people were just blindly crazy, but the troublesome thing was that they were not blind. There was no lack of geniuses in Poison Fong. Even if they went to extremes and had twisted personalities, one had to admit that they had something in their heads. They liked weapons of mass destruction and nuclear reactions with high radiation energy. Sector V had plenty of places for them to test new weapons, and that was why more than half of them suffered from radiation sickness. A few days ago, Poison Fong tested a new nuclear weapon, and they forcefully turned a rank B habitable planet into a rank C planet. The remaining survivors were tortured and killed one by one. To this end, the League of Stars' military had sent people to Sector V to surround and kill Poison Fong. Strangely, however, Poison Fong did not fight them head-on this time. Instead, they gathered their people, stole some warships and fighters, and left Sector V for Sector Z. Some people say that they were forced to flee to Sector Z, but I don't think it's that simple. Bart said. I'll be careful. Shotten could not be careless when it came to Poison Fong. You came to Sector Z to complete a mission. If you run into Poison Fong, stay as far away as possible. It may be a little frustrating, but if you want to avoid unnecessary casualties, don't fight them head-on. We're not the army, and we don't have rigid rules. Don't be like Heaven's Birth. Heaven's Birth was one of the 4 great hunter regiments, just like Vanguard. A few years ago, a Heaven's Birth B squadron had encountered Poison Fong's people when they headed to Sector V and fought them head-on. Although their losses weren't great, it wasn't small either. After all, the people who could fight solo in the B squadron of the 4 great hunter regiments were all elites. Losing even one was a loss. On the other hand, Poison Fong had dropped 5 consecutive shockwave bombs on the densest area of the aircrafts while the 2 sides were engaged in battle. More than 30 aircrafts were blasted to smithereens, and 9 of them belonged to Heaven's Birth B squadron while the other 20 belonged to Poison Fong themselves. This was why they were so crazy. Naturally, Shotten knew about Heaven's Birth. If the 6th squad ran into the current Poison Fong, Shotten felt a headache coming on. My suggestion is for you to turn back and leave Sector Z. After all, you've discovered a couple of different energy ores, and this is enough for them to go crazy. Although the news hasn't been leaked yet, it's better to be safe than sorry. If your squad runs into the current Poison Fong, your losses will probably be huge. Bart's expression was serious. After a period of thought, Shotten said, I'll discuss this with the lieutenant commanders before making a decision. After Sillin exited the spaceplane, he returned to the starship with NG. NG brought Sillin to his own workshop. There were some parasites sealed there, but they were all specimens and not alive. They may be dead, and they don't have eggs, but the genetic material in these specimens is still intact. NG pointed at one of the parasites he discovered during a starship cleaning. Their genetic material is different from human DNA. Their genetic material isn't made up of purines and pyrimidines like us humans or common life forms, but a couple of other substances. Sillin accepted the document NG handed over. It was NG's research results in his spare time. It was just some basic research and not in-depth. After all, NG wasn't a professional in this field. While they were talking, Sillin's communicator rang. It was Carrie again. Sillin, where the hell are you slacking off? Come over now. What is it this time? Come over and move the oars. Those transport robots go crazy the moment they touch the oars, so we have no choice but to do it ourselves. The commander told us to hurry up, he has other plans for us later. Alright, got it. I'll be right there. Sillin disconnected, apologized to NG, and left to move the oars. NG waved his hand. It's time for our team to follow up. I'll go check on the starship first. You guys go ahead. When Sillin returned to the mining site on the planet, Carrie was moving the oars. The dark red energy ores made him look even darker. Putting the energy ores on the transporter, Carrie wiped his sweat. I didn't know this stuff was so heavy. Hey, Sillin, I heard we have to change our plan. Sillin gave him a questioning look. Carrie looked around and whispered, I heard it from the deputy commander, but I don't know the reason. The deputy commanders were called to a meeting again. They're probably thinking about this. Seeing that Sillin didn't respond, Carrie elbowed Sillin again. Aren't you curious why? With the commander's personality, he won't give up on the original plans so easily. Yes, continue. Sillin rolled up his sleeves, walked over to pick up an energy ore, and walked over to the transporter. Carrie also picked up a piece, but his attention was clearly not on it. That means there must be some special reason. Take a guess. What is it? How would I know? We'll know after the commander's meeting. Why are you so anxious now? Carrie was about to say something when Tang Qiuqiu jumped out of an aircraft that had just landed. Big brother Sillin, big brother Carrie, I'll show you something. Tang Qiuqiu ran over with a smile, something wrapped in her clothes. Hui Mao's nose twitched. Yummy. Tang Qiuqiu carefully opened the wrapped jacket, revealing an egg the size of 2 fists. There were white circles on the egg, and it was very beautiful. Oh, not bad. It'll be an extra for dinner. Carrie laughed. I want to eat too. Hui Mao moved forward. No, I found this not far from where Uncle Lu Suo and the others were mining. Look, doesn't it look like cream candy? Since Tang Qiuqiu had nothing better to do, she went to the mining sites to take a look. Not far away from the mining site in the land of ice and snow, Tang Qiuqiu was digging ice for fun and warming herself in the process. Who knew that she would find an egg like this? Normally, Tang Qiuqiu didn't have much love for eggs, but this egg looked very much like the cream lollipop she loved to eat. The circles of white lines looked like the rings of cream smeared on the outside of the lollipop. Tang Qiuqiu fell in love with it at first glance. If this egg looked similar to other eggs, it would probably be thrown into the frying pan. Chapter 108. Carrie poked the egg in Tang Qiuqiu's arms and asked, "What exactly was this egg made of?" "I don't know. Uncle Lu Suo said that they encountered a few types of exotic beasts. I just don't know which one this egg belongs to. However, I've memorized all the exotic beasts that Uncle Lu Suo mentioned." Tang Qiuqiu took out an electronic notebook and showed the image to Sillin and Carrie. "You only need to smell it and you'll know. There's no need to go through so much trouble." Hui Mao said disdainfully. "Really?" Tang Qiuqiu's eyes lit up. "I saw some claws and fur of the exotic beasts that Uncle Lu Suo and the others killed on the aircraft. Are those all you can smell?" "Of course." Hui Mao raised his head proudly. Tang Qiuqiu brought Hui Mao to the aircraft. Carrie asked Sillin, "What's inside the egg?" The exotic beasts that Lu Suo and the others encountered were quite terrifying. No matter which one it was, they all felt dangerous. "Or maybe it's none of them," Sillin said. When Sillin touched the egg just now, he did an isotope analysis on it. Although he didn't have an accurate reference, Sillin was certain that the egg was definitely more than 500 years old, or even 1,000 years old. It was even older than Hui Mao. The most amazing thing was that the egg was still alive. Although the life force inside the egg wasn't strong, it was easily detected when one got close. As expected, not long after, when Hui Mao and Tang Qiuqiu came out, Tang Qiuqiu was obviously doubtful. Her conclusion was, "It's none of them." "Let's put the egg in the incubator when we get back. Maybe we'll know the answer soon enough," Carrie suggested. At this time, Carrie was hoping that there wouldn't be a second Miantuan hatching. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to store anything in his storage cabinet anymore. "All right, but I will visit it often." Tang Qiuqiu touched the egg in her arms and smiled happily. After the meeting, Diaz gathered everyone in the team for a meeting. His intention was to change their original plan and leave Sector Z. According to the League of Stars calendar, the 6th squad had been in Sector Z for a few months now, and it would be about a year by the time they left. It was already a great harvest to find these minerals and a planet with a rank B habitability in a year, but some people were still a little reluctant to suddenly abandon their original plan and return straight away. According to their usual style of doing things, they wouldn't stop here even if their harvest was bountiful. However, they wouldn't complain about anything either. The captains naturally had their reasons for their decisions. After Diaz was done, he left some of the core members behind to continue the meeting and briefly explain the matter of Poison Fong. The moment Poison Fong was mentioned, everyone knew immediately. No wonder the captains would make such a decision. It made sense. Who would want to run into those madmen at this time? After moving a portion of the mined energy ores to the special energy storage on the starship, the 6th squad left the planet. The A squad would take over the remaining matters on the planet, and the 6th squad didn't have to worry about anything else. In order to return and leave Sector Z, Schotten didn't turn back the way he came. This was also the result of his discussion with the lieutenant commanders. They would leave through another path. Although this path had been explored before, it was only a small part of it. If they could find something that they missed, then it would make everyone feel a little more balanced, and they wouldn't have the mood to turn back halfway. It had to be said that the planet along this path was quite good. It didn't take long for them to discover a planet that was unmarked on the star map and had no signal response from the planet. Its habitability was rank C. The 6th squad stopped, and Schotten sent someone to explore the planet. Meanwhile, Sillin, Carrie, and a few others were chatting at the lounge outside the control room. Sillin, the captain's looking for you. Carrie called out from his chair without looking back. Sillin turned around and saw Schotten walking in from outside the door. Actually, he could have just contacted him through the communicator if there was anything. However, since Schotten had come in person, it shouldn't be a simple matter. Sillin, I just received a message from Bart that there's something he needs to solve with Wheeze. Fortunately, we're not too far away, so you can arrive in less than 2 days with a long-range spaceplane. If there's no problem, you can go with Wheeze. It's probably about the energy ores. The exploration here will take about 5 or 6 days, so it might not be done by the time you return. There's no need to rush. Schotten said. The planet was huge, and someone had just reported the discovery of some energy ores. Although they were just ordinary energy ores, it was still good enough. Therefore, more than one small team was sent this time. Based on the current situation, the exploration would take a little longer. Alright, I'm free now. We can set off right away. The space plane has been prepared for you. The pilot has already been arranged. You don't need to pilot it yourself. Wait, Captain, can I go too? Carrie scooted over excitedly. He was regretting that he forgot to stock up on food. He remembered that there were many special fruits there. When he had time, he would hunt a few beasts to make jerky and bring back to grind. I'll go too. I'll go too. Tang Qiuqiu jumped over. The egg was already in the incubator, but Yudi said that some parameters were missing. Although these parameters could be calculated slowly, it would be good to go back and get more data. Sure. Schotten didn't object. All right, let's get ready to go. Sillin asked Carrie and Tang Qiuqiu to pack up. He picked up Hui Mao, who was bullying the Miantuan, and walked toward the spaceplane that Schotten had prepared. Although the maximum speed of the spaceplane was not as fast as a starship, it was just as Schotten had said. They returned to the green planet in 2 days. When Bart and the others obtained new parameters and recalculated the planet, they guessed that there might be a few more mineral deposits. However, they couldn't calculate the exact location. They could only calculate a rough range. The improved detector could only narrow down the range, but it couldn't determine the exact location. It just so happened that the 6th team wasn't too far away, and they encountered a planet with a C-class habitability that needed to stay for a while. After discussing it with Schotten, Bart let Sillin and Hui Mao come over. The detector couldn't detect the mineral deposits, but Hui Mao solved them quickly. There were indeed energy ores, but they were all small ones. The quality of the energy ores was much worse for Hui Mao than the ones he had eaten. Therefore, Hui Mao didn't pay much attention to these small mineral deposits. Since Bart wanted to find them, Hui Mao helped him find them. For this, Bart specially gave Hui Mao a large piece of energy ore of good quality. When Hui Mao had nothing to do, he would hug the energy ore and gnaw on it. Carrie and a few members of the A-team went to hunt a few exotic beasts, roasted them, and turned them into jerky. They also got some fruits, specially stored them in a large storage bag, and brought them to the spaceplane. Under the guidance of the people sent by Bart, Tang Qiuqiu headed to the land of ice and snow. She measured some of the missing parameters that Yudi mentioned, so that she could more accurately adjust the incubator's incubation environment when she returned. In a day, everything that needed to be done was done. Sillin and the others didn't stay for long. They boarded the space plane and left the green planet, flying back to where the fleet was. Going back and forth, including the day they stayed on the green planet, made a total of 5 days. For the hunters who traveled between sectors, it really wasn't a long time. However, it was in these 5 days that the 6th team underwent a huge change. When Sillin and the others arrived at the fleet's resting point, they were greeted by the sight of fighter wreckages floating in space. What exactly happened? Generally speaking, every spacecraft that came in from the outside had to be inspected to prevent any foreign threats from being brought into the starship without their knowledge. The person in charge of the inspection had always been NG, but not today. Instead, it was NG's assistant. Although the assistant was wearing a protective mask and his expression couldn't be seen, Sillin noticed that his hand holding the cleaning tube was still trembling. Silence. It was so oppressive that it was hard to breathe. Shotten had someone bring them to the main ship and briefly explain the situation. A day after Sillin and the others left, the 6th Division ran into Poison Fong. This was something Shotten had been trying to avoid all this time, but he never succeeded. No one expected Poison Fong to pass through here. They did not try to hide themselves, and it was as if they wanted to tell everyone where they entered Sector Z, where they passed through, and which direction they went. Running into Vanguard Division 6 was also unexpected for Poison Fong, but it also stimulated their bloodthirst. They would fight the 4 great hunter regiments if they could run into them, and they would not give them any face at all. Originally, the 6th Squad should not have suffered too much of a loss against Poison Fong even if their new energy weapon had not been developed yet. But the problem was that when Poison Fong came over, a couple of small teams were scouting the planet and isolated from the starship. Therefore, when Poison Fong's fighters attacked, the situation was very disadvantageous. Poison Fong's people had attacked in a suicidal manner and did not care about anything else. It was easy to imagine what kind of attack the scouts on the planet had encountered. Less than half of the people returned safely from the planet. Diaz and Lu Suo were heavily injured and were still in the ICU. Akai, Wachin, the 2 lieutenants, and more than 30 members were captured. As for why they were captured and not something else, Shotten did not say. There were also some members who returned to the starship who were still heavily injured and in critical condition, such as Beaver, Yudi, and the others. Although Xiao Shang and Ba Dao were injured, their injuries were not serious. They had been staying on the medical floor of the main ship all this time. The medical floor of the main ship was filled with hurried paramedics and the members who were waiting anxiously outside the emergency rooms. When Celine came up, she saw Ba Dao and Xiao Shang standing outside the door of an ICU. Their expressions were heavy, and they seemed to be in a very depressed mood. Carrie said a few words to them before covering his eyes and leaning against the wall. Feeling his hand being held, Celine turned his head and saw that Tang Qiuqiu was holding her bag with one hand and tightly holding Celine's hand with the other. It was as if she was holding on to the last life-saving rope. Up until now, Tang Qiuqiu had not said a word or cried. She simply stared blankly at the sick room with wide eyes. She did not see clearly who was lying inside the sick room, and she was also afraid to find out. Her feet felt like they were nailed to the ground. Celine crouched down and picked up Tang Qiuqiu. Then he walked towards the sick room. The closer he got, the tighter Tang Qiuqiu's grip on Celine's hand became. Through the transparent barrier, Celine saw the people inside. It was Yudi, Beaver, and a few other members of the same team. They were lying quietly in the ICU. From the equipment and the data displayed on their bodies, Celine knew that they were not out of danger yet. He did not know how long they would stay like this, and he did not know who would be able to survive until the end. "Where's the vice captain?" Celine looked at Xiao Shang. "That ward." Xiao Shang pointed at a sick room. His voice was still trembling and suppressed. However, when Celine saw the sick room Xiao Shang was pointing at, he sighed in relief. That sick room was the one that was out of danger. Celine carried Tang Qiuqiu and walked to the sick room Xiao Shang mentioned. Through the barrier, Celine saw Diaz lying on the bed. He was probably asleep. Asha was guarding him. Her eyes were red and she looked haggard. Celine and Tang Qiuqiu walked into the sick room. When they entered, they realized that Diaz was missing an arm. Looking at the stable data displayed on the equipment, Silin patted Tang Qiuqiu's head. Vice Captain is fine. He'll wake up after a nap. You and Vice Captain Asha stay here with Vice Captain. I'll go check on the others, okay? Tang Qiuqiu lowered her head and nodded. Asha got up and led Tang Qiuqiu to the other side to sit down. Her movements were gentle, afraid that she would wake Dias up. After leaving Dias's sick room, Silin asked around before heading to another sick room in the intensive care unit. The people in the intensive care unit in this area were in a worse condition than Yudi and Beaver. At least Yudi and Beaver could still recover. However, the people here had already been sentenced to death. The treatment would only allow them to stay in this world for a while longer. Non-medical personnel were not allowed to enter the sick room because they would carry germs. Silin stood there quietly and looked at the people inside. The person lying on the sickbed, who was almost completely covered by the medical equipment, seemed to have sensed something. He raised his hand to lift the equipment off his head. The medical staff next to him wanted to stop him but was waved away by the hands. It was hard to imagine that he still had the strength to push away the medical staff in such a situation. Silin, come here. Chapter 110. Silin took an isolation suit from the medical staff and put it on before walking into the ICU. After entering, Silin realized that only one of NG's 3 pairs of hands was left. NG was skinny to begin with, and now it felt like he was only supported by bones. The medical staff had told Silin earlier that NG's injuries were too severe. Coupled with NG's gene rank, he might not be able to hold on for long. Even with the help of the medical equipment, he would only be able to hold on for 2 days at most. Most importantly, NG had no intention of surviving. Silin walked to NG's side and sat down. He leaned forward to listen carefully to what NG had to say. NG was having difficulty breathing, and every word he said required a lot of energy. However, although NG spoke very slowly and his voice was not loud, his pronunciation was very clear. Bring the diary over. I'll go get it right now. Silin got up and ran out quickly. Of course, Silin knew which diary NG was talking about. Not long after, he brought Communidin's diary to NG. The last page. Silin flipped the diary to the last page. Although the middle of the notebook was mostly blank, there were words on the last page. It was a poem. NG looked in one direction. There was a shelf outside the ICU, and on it were some of the items that the patients brought with them when they were sent in. Among them was NG's small toolbox. Silin brought the toolbox over. The medical staff wanted to sterilize the box, but NG waved his hand. No need. When Silin brought the box closer, NG raised his hand and grabbed it tightly. He touched the box lightly and opened it. He swiped his finger on a small compartment inside. After unlocking it, NG took out a key from inside. It was the key to NG's workshop. On the starship, very few people used keys instead of password locks. NG handed the key to Silin and placed it in Silin's palm. NG didn't trust anyone else with the things in the workshop. NG felt that only Silin would understand the preciousness of the things inside. NG had difficulty breathing due to the removal of the equipment on his head. Silin wanted to help him put on the device again, but NG refused. If I put on these things, I won't be able to hear. NG caught his breath and pointed at the notebook. He asked Silin, I remember that you're from Sector X. Do you know Sector X's sector language? Silin nodded. A smile appeared in NG's eyes. It's been a long time since I've heard Sector X's language. Help me read the poem at the back of the notebook in Sector X's sector language. NG's words were spoken calmly, but Silin felt that NG was speaking with his last breath. However, his eyes were bright as if he could see the distant starlight. Communidin was originally from Sector X, and his dream was to become a freelance poet. Later on, Communidin's hometown was affected by war, and he met the then 3rd B Squadron Commander Nada. He was brought to the 3rd B Squadron by Nada and became a member of the 3rd Squad. Even after he arrived at the 3rd B Squadron, Communidin still wrote poems frequently. Every notebook and diary contained at least a few poems. At the time, NG and some people from the 3rd Squad listened to Communidin recite poems in his standard Sector X's sector language. However, those people had all died in the incident that year, and NG had been transferred to the 6th Squad before that. That was how he had avoided that disaster. However, if NG had a choice, he would rather become a speck of dust in the universe with those people. NG's current age, according to the age of the OTOP people, was only a third of the average age. However, NG was already satisfied. Sitting beside NG's sickbed, Sillin flipped open the notebook and looked at the poem on the last page. Then he began to read slowly. From heaven or heaven's vicinity, and with the music that flows freely, pour out your heart with unpolished art. Fly up and soar higher, from the ground you leap, like a cloud of blazing fire. Through the blue heart of the sky, forever singing to fly, flying to sing. The sun below the horizon, radiating golden lightning, rosy clouds steaming in the clear sky, you soak in the sunlight, like an incorporeal joy just beginning a swift expedition. Faint purple dawn melts around your voyage, like the stars in the day sky, though you can't see them, yet you can hear the strong sound of your joy clearly, the music that is incomparably sharp, like a sharp sword of silver starlight, its strong light, dimmed in the morning light, until it's hard to distinguish, yet you can feel it in space. It was a very standard Sector X's sector language. The medics didn't understand it. They weren't from Sector X, and they only needed to know the League of Stars' language to navigate the galaxy. Moreover, they had always thought that all languages other than their homeland's language and the League of Stars' language were awkward. But when they heard Sillin's voice now, they felt an unusual feeling. It was like a cool breeze brushing across the sandy ground, sweeping up dust and blowing it straight into the blue sky. The light in NG's eyes was very gentle. It was as if he had met an old friend from many years ago. NG's genotype rank was not high. The average genotype rank of an OTOP person was rank C. However, perhaps because he had been exposed to too many rays, NG's genotype rank was only rank D. Moreover, compared to the usual robust OTOP people, NG was pitifully thin. The happiest days of NG's life were when he was carried by Communidin to sail within the galaxy. So it had been almost 50 years before he knew it. As if in the desolate night, behind a solitary cloud, the bright moon shines its light, and its clear splendor fills the universe. After reading the poem, Sillin closed the notebook and looked at NG, who still had his eyes closed and a smile on his lips. He bowed. "Have a safe journey." The heartbeat shown on the machine had stopped. Sillin walked out of NG's ward. Ba Dao stood outside the ward for who knew how long. Ba Dao felt that he couldn't understand Sillin. From the moment Sillin came to this floor, whether it was Yudi, Beaver, and the others in the ICU, Dias, who had already passed away but lost an arm, or NG, who had just passed away, Sillin had been terrifyingly calm. What was this person's true thoughts? Ba Dao didn't think that Sillin didn't care about their lives, but compared to Carrie and Xiao Shang, Sillin's calmness was creepy. There was no emotion on his face, but when he met that pair of eyes, Ba Dao couldn't help but feel the urge to retreat. Ba Dao remembered what his seniors had said. There is a kind of person, when their emotions reach an extreme, they will be no different from normal. If you encounter this kind of person, don't provoke them, or you won't even know how you died. Sillin. Ba Dao wanted to say something, but after 2 words, he couldn't say anything else. How are Yudi and Beaver? Sillin asked. His voice was so calm that not a trace of emotion could be heard. The medical staff said they're getting better. They just need to survive these 2 days. They have to rely on themselves. The medicine might have side effects, so unless it's the last resort, no one dares to use it. Sillin nodded and walked to Yudi's ward to take a look. The Miantuan was stuck to the wall. It looked like he hadn't eaten for a few days. After looking at the situation, Sillin walked out. Description: the poem was extracted from Shelley's To the Skylark. Chapter 111. Shotten sat in the meeting room with his hand pressed against his forehead. His eyebrows were knitted together and his body was covered in fatigue. Sitting next to Shotten was Laro, the only one among the 6 who was relatively well. Dias and Lu Suo were heavily injured, and Asha had been guarding Dias all this time. Akai and Wachin had been captured, so Laro was the only one left. Both Shotten and Laro had been silent since they entered the meeting room. They didn't know what to say. Putting our hopes on the A Squadron? Shotten wiped his face. He hadn't rested for a moment for the past few days. As expected, the 6th Division was still too few in number. The former 6th Division's captain was a very strong person, but he was also very independent. In fact, the reason the 6th Division did not lag behind the 10B squadrons of Vanguard even though they were few in number back then was because the former 6th Division's captain, Theru was so strong and well-rounded that many things in the 6th Division were handled by Theru himself. This was because no one else was as efficient as Theru, and Theru was a person who paid great attention to efficiency. As a result, many people in the 6th Division grew dependent on him. Ever since Theru was transferred to the A Squadron and Shotten took over as the captain, the 6th Division's shortcomings finally began to show themselves. Fortunately, there was Dias. Dias was a good judge of character, and when Shotten took over, he quickly replenished some people to fill the giant hole caused by Theru's promotion. Shotten had always been full of confidence until Silin's group of newcomers arrived. However, Shotten had been hesitant for the past few days. A single poison fang had forced them into this state, and Shotten really didn't know what to do. In fact, he didn't even have someone to share the burden with. At this time, the meeting room's doorbell rang. Shotten brought up the light screen and saw Silin standing outside the door. He paused, let out a long sigh, and pressed the button to open the door. Shotten pointed at a chair beside him. "Sit." Silin pulled over a chair and sat down. He looked at Lieutenant Laro, and then at the tired-looking Shotten. He said, "Can you tell me what happened?" Shotten took his hand off his forehead and brought up a display. He moved it in front of Silin. "This is the video of that time." After that, Shotten fell silent. Silin stared at the image displayed. From the appearance of the battleships, to the collisions between the starships and fighter jets, to the emergency retreat of the scouts under the cover of the dispatched fighter jets, the most obvious example of this was Poison Fang's suicidal ramming. The clashing fighter jets were like fireworks that had suddenly exploded in the night sky, carrying with them a sense of helplessness and tragedy. Silin could feel everyone's emotions at that time. No one would have an easy time facing a bunch of lunatics. Their usual strategies and techniques were truly useless against these lunatics. Poison Fang's men were experienced, skilled, and their craziness. Even the people watching the video couldn't help but feel incredulous. No wonder the military and hunter regiments were unwilling to fight Poison Fang. Poison Fang could afford to go crazy, but they couldn't. To avoid a repeat of the same mistake, the 6th Squad's fighter jets were spread out far apart. It would be easier for them to avoid any sudden incidents, unlike Heaven's Birth where they were bombarded with shockwave bombs. However, Poison Fang didn't seem to be planning to use shockwave bombs at all this time. The continuous, indiscriminate attacks and suicidal ramming really did make people feel very pressured. After that, the lucky ones successfully returned to their starships, while the unlucky ones were forever left on that planet. There were also some people who were intercepted and captured by Poison Fang. Dias and Yudi were among the lucky ones, but this luck came at a heavy price. From the moment Silin started watching the video, Shotten and Laro had been observing Silin's expression. But to their surprise, Silin's expression didn't change at all. There wasn't even a hint of killing intent. After Shotten sent the video to Bart and Bart's reply, Shotten could sense Bart and Songba Laro's killing intent even though it was just a video. The young man in front of him was terrifyingly calm. After watching the video, Silin turned around and asked Shotten, "What's going on with the group of captives?" Those who were familiar with Poison Fang knew that they basically wouldn't do something like captives. Even if they did capture captives, they would torture and kill them one by one. But the strange thing was that they hadn't received any information about torture and killing until now. Shotten habitually tapped the table with his finger and pondered for a moment. He seemed to be thinking about how he should tell them about this matter. Originally, Poison Fang was prepared to torture and kill them, but they learned about the energy ores and were prepared to extort them. They only told us to wait for further instructions. Not long ago, The 4 great hunter regiments were so famous that even other hunter regiments would more or less give them some face, much less the military and political side. When had they ever been forced to this extent? Extortion. Schotten felt a deep sense of guilt, whether it was towards his sacrificed teammates, the bedridden Dias and the others, or the entire vanguard. This was a deep wound. Sillin understood that the fact that Poison Fong knew about the energy ores did not mean that there was a traitor in the squad. As long as it was someone who had not received special training, there were many ways to make them divulge some secret information. Moreover, Poison Fong was a lunatic who had all kinds of tricks up their sleeves. They definitely had even more extreme methods to make the captives spill their secrets in a state where they were unaware. Where did they go? I don't know. Schotten shook his head. There were too many things to do on the starship after the chaotic war, and there were still hostages on Poison Fong's side. Poison Fong forbade them from tailing them, and Schotten did not allow anyone to follow them either. He knew that if Poison Fong discovered that they were tailing them in secret, there was no telling how many of the 30 or so lives would be spared. What do you think, Commander? Sillin asked again. Bart has already learned of the situation, and the A Squadron just so happens to have reinforcements heading towards that green planet as well. He told us to wait for a while and send some people over to support us when the reinforcements arrive. Everyone in the 4 great hunter regiments knew that B squadrons and a squadron were 2 different concepts. A B squadron was a place to test people, and only the best could enter the A squadron. No B squadron would want to ask for reinforcements from the A squadron, because that meant that their B squadron was no good. Like a child who had yet to grow up, they had to ask their parents for help when they encountered difficulties that they could not solve on their own. But for the sake of the 6th Division, Schotten still sent a message to Bart and explained the situation. Even though Bart had comforted him by saying that Poison Fong was a special organization that no ordinary B squadron could resist, Schotten still felt suffocated. Every time he looked at the wreckage floating outside the starship and thought of his squad members lying on the sickbeds, Schotten felt a deep sense of exhaustion. If there is any extortion information, I hope that you can tell me, Commander. Sillin stood up and prepared to leave. Suddenly, the emergency communicator next to Schotten rang. Commander, there's an unmanned transport flying over. There's also an unknown signal. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.